Tonight, as the world grows quiet and the day releases its hold on your shoulders, I invite you to walk with me through 12 gardens of ancient wisdom. Each garden holds a story, and each story holds a key not to understanding, which is of the mind, but to releasing, which is of the heart. You need not remember these tales when morning comes. Let them work on you the way moonlight works on a garden, illuminating without effort, transforming without force. Feel yourself settling now, your body finding its natural weight against the softness that holds you. We have time. We have all the time that exists between this breath and sleep. And so, let us walk together into the first garden, where two monks are traveling along a muddy road, and where something is about to be carried that need not be carried at all. The rain had fallen for 3 days in the mountains of old Japan, turning the roads to rivers of mud. Two monks, Tanzan and Aikido, were making their way back to the monastery, their robes already heavy with moisture, their feet seeking solid ground with each careful step. Tanzan was the younger of the two, known for his warm laugh and his kindness to animals. Aikido was senior, a man who had studied the precepts for decades, who knew every rule and observed each one with the dedication of water-wearing stone. The afternoon light was struggling through the clouds, turning everything the color of pewter and pearl. You could smell the earth, rich and dark, releasing its ancient scent into the air. The sound of their footsteps was a soft, sucking rhythm: step, release, a meditation of movement through the world's wetness. They came to a crossroad where a small stream had overflowed its banks, creating a wide puddle of uncertain depth, muddy water spreading across the intersection like a small inland sea. And there, at the edge of this muddy crossing, stood a young woman in a beautiful silk kimono. The fabric was the color of cherry blossoms, now spattered with mud along the hem. She stood very still, looking at the water with an expression of quiet distress. Tanzan saw her predicament immediately. She was clearly on her way to some important occasion. Perhaps a wedding, perhaps a tea ceremony, and the crossing would ruin her elaborate dress, would turn her carefully arranged appearance into a disaster of mud and shame. Without hesitation, without even speaking, Tanzan approached her and said simply, "Please, allow me to help you across." The young woman's eyes widened slightly. She knew, as Aikido knew, as everyone in that time and place knew, that monks were forbidden by their precepts to touch women. The rule was ancient, designed to maintain purity, to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. But Tanzan was already gesturing for her to climb onto his back, his face showing nothing but simple kindness, as if the question had never occurred to him. She climbed on, light as a question mark, her silk sleeves whispering against his rough robes. Tanzan stepped into the muddy water, feeling the cold seep into his sandals, the unstable ground shifting beneath each step. Aikido stood on the bank, watching, his face unreadable as stone, as still water before wind touches it. The crossing took perhaps 20 steps. Tanzan set the young woman down gently on the far side, on dry ground where her silk could stay silk. She bowed deeply, gratitude and confusion mixing in her expression, and hurried away toward whatever ceremony awaited her. Tanzan rejoined Aikido without a word. The two monks continued walking, their pace the same steady rhythm: step, release, step, release. The road began to climb slightly, leading them into the foothills where the monastery waited. Pine trees appeared, their needles dark against the grey sky. Somewhere, a crow called out, its voice sharp and clear in the wet air. Aikido said nothing. His face remained composed, but something in his shoulders had tightened, something in his breathing had changed. They walked for an hour, perhaps more, the silence between them growing heavier than their soaked robes, more difficult to carry than any burden of mud or rain. The sun was beginning its descent, turning the clouds at the horizon, the color of the bruise healing, purple and gold mixing together. They passed a small shrine where someone had left offerings of rice and flowers, now wilted by the rain. They crossed a wooden bridge where water rushed beneath them, swollen and urgent. Still, Aikido said nothing, but the nothing had become a presence, a thing that walked between them, like a third monk made entirely of unexpressed words. Finally, as they approached the monastery gates, As the familiar silhouette of the temple roof appeared against the darkening sky, Ikido could contain himself no longer. He stopped walking. Tanzan stopped too, turning to face his elder companion with patient curiosity. "That woman back there," Ikido said, his voice tight as a drawn bowstring. "We are not permitted to touch women. You know this. We took vows. The precepts are clear. How could you carry her like that? How could you violate what we have promised?" The words hung in the evening air, like the last raindrops falling from leaves. Tanzan looked at his companion with eyes that held no defensiveness, no shame, no justification, just a kind of gentle clarity, like water that has settled after being stirred. "Brother," Tanzan said softly, "I set her down hours ago, on the far side of the muddy road. Why are you still carrying her?" The question landed like a stone dropped into still water, ripples spreading outward into silence. Ikido's mouth opened, then closed. His eyes widened slightly as the teaching penetrated, as the truth of it reached past his defenses and touched something deeper than rules, deeper than precepts, deeper than the identity he had built from decades of careful observance. He had been carrying her, carrying the image of her, the judgment of the situation, the weight of his disapproval for hours. He had been carrying her through the rain-soaked hills, up the ascending path, across the wooden bridge, all the way to the monastery gates. Tanzan had picked her up and set her down in 20 steps. Ikido had been carrying her for miles, and would have carried her into his meditation, into his sleep, into his tomorrow, if Tanzan had not held up this mirror of words. The Buddha once taught, holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. But this teaching goes deeper than anger. It touches every judgment we clutch, every story we refuse to release, every moment we replay endlessly in the theatre of our minds, while the present moment, innocent and new, waits patiently for our attention. Notice now, as you lie here in the darkness, what you might be carrying that was meant to be set down hours ago, days ago, perhaps years ago. Not to judge yourself for the carrying, we all do this. We are all Aikido, walking with something that no longer needs to be held, but simply to notice with the same gentle clarity that Tanzan offered his companion. What conversation are you still having that ended this morning? What sleight are you polishing like a stone in your pocket, smooth now from so much handling? What future worry are you carrying on your back across a muddy road that exists only in your imagination? The Buddha taught that we ourselves must walk the path, but he did not say we must carry everything we encounter along the way. Feel your body now, growing heavier, sinking deeper into rest. With each exhale, something can be set down. You need not know what it is. Your body knows. Your deeper wisdom knows. The breath knows how to release what the mind forgets it's holding. Tanzan carried the woman for 20 steps because compassion required it, then set her down because compassion required that too. He lived in the continuous present tense, where each action arises fresh from necessity and completes itself naturally, leaving no residue, no story, no weight to carry forward. This is the gateless gate, the pathless path, the burden that is no burden because it is picked up and released in the same eternal now. Aikido learned something that evening that no amount of studying precepts could teach him. He learned that the letter of the law without the spirit of love is itself a burden, a kind of mud that clings to the soul. He learned that true purity is not in never touching, but in touching fully and releasing completely. He learned that the lightest way to walk through the world is to set down what you have carried as soon as its purpose is complete. As you drift now toward sleep, imagine yourself at that crossroad. The rain has stopped. The evening light is soft, and there in the mud at your feet, you can see the outline of everything you've been carrying that was meant to be set down long ago. One by one, without effort, without drama, you can step over these things. You can leave them there in the mud where they belong, where the rain will wash them clean, where the earth will receive them back. Let us walk together now toward the next garden, where another teacher waits with another key. But first, rest here for a moment. Feel the lightness that comes from setting down. Feel how much easier it is to breathe when you're not carrying what was never yours to carry in the first place. The monastery bells are ringing in the distance, calling the monks to evening meditation. But you need not go anywhere. You are already exactly where you need to be, growing lighter with each breath, releasing with each exhale, settling into the truth that Tanzan knew all along, that the present moment asks only for presence, not for the weight of every moment that came before. Rest now, set down, let go. The muddy road is behind you, and the path ahead requires nothing but these soft steps into sleep, into dreams, into the garden, where the next story is already beginning to bloom. This brings to mind another teacher, a wandering monk who lived more than 2 centuries ago in the mountains of Japan. His name was Ryokan, and if you had met him on a forest path, you might have mistaken him for a beggar. His robes patched and faded, his begging bowl simple clay, his possessions so few they could be counted on one hand. But those who knew him recognized something else entirely. A man who had discovered that true wealth has nothing to do with what you own, and everything to do with what you no longer need. Feel yourself settling deeper now. Your breathing finding its own rhythm, slow and easy as a river finding its course. Let us walk together into Ryokan's world, where poverty and richness dance together like moonlight on water, where loss becomes gift, and where the greatest treasure cannot be stolen because it was never something you could hold in your hands. Ryokan lived alone in a small hut on Mount Kugami. The hut was barely larger than the space you now occupy, perhaps 10 feet across, with walls of thin wood and paper, a roof of thatch that whispered when the wind moved through it. Inside, there was a sleeping mat, a few cooking pots, some brushes for writing poetry, and little else. No furniture to speak of. No decorations except what nature provided through the window. The changing seasons, the dance of light and shadow, the silent conversation between earth and sky. He supported himself by begging in the village below, walking the mountain path each morning with his clay bowl, accepting whatever was offered with equal gratitude. Rice, vegetables, sometimes nothing but a kind word. In the afternoons he would play with the village children, his laughter carrying across the fields like birdsong. In the evenings he would write poetry, meditate, or simply sit and watch the world transform itself from day to night. That ancient alchemy that requires no ingredients but time. The Buddha taught, "He who envies others does not obtain peace of mind." But Ryokan had gone further than merely avoiding envy. He had discovered that contentment flowers most abundantly in the soil of simplicity, that the fewer things you own, the more fully you can appreciate what exists beyond ownership. One night in late autumn, when the air had turned crisp and the stars were sharp as ice, Ryokan returned to his hut after a day of wandering. He had been visiting a distant temple, sharing poems with other monks, drinking tea and talking about the Dharma. Those teachings that can never quite be captured in words, but somehow live in the spaces between them. The moon was full, enormous, hanging in the sky like a paper lantern lit from within. As he approached his hut, Ryokan noticed immediately that something was different. The door, which he never locked, what would be the point of locking a door when you have nothing worth stealing, was slightly ajar. Inside he could hear movement, the soft sounds of someone searching, the rustle of fabric, the scrape of pottery against wood. A thief. Someone had come to rob him. Now, you or I might feel fear in such a moment, or anger, or violation. The civilized mind, trained to defend its territory, to protect its possessions, rises up like a dog protecting its bone. But Ryokan felt something different. A kind of tender sadness, mixed with compassion. This poor person, he thought, has climbed all the way up the mountain in the darkness, risking injury on the steep path, driven by such desperation or need that they would steal from a monk who has nothing. Ryokan stood quietly outside his hut, listening. He could picture the scene inside, the thief frantically searching through his meager belongings, looking for something valuable, finding nothing but a few chipped bowls, some worn clothing, writing brushes whose value exists only to one who writes. The sounds of searching grew more urgent, more frustrated. The thief was discovering what Ryokan could have told him. There was nothing here worth stealing. Finally, the door slid open, and the thief emerged, a young man, barely more than a boy, his face thin with hunger, his eyes wide with fear and disappointment. He froze when he saw Ryokan standing there in the moonlight, caught, exposed, perhaps expecting anger or a call for help. But Ryokan simply smiled. That warm smile that had comforted so many children, that had accompanied so many cups of tea with fellow seekers. "You have come a long way," he said gently. "You should not leave empty-handed." The thief stared at him, confused, unable to reconcile this response with everything he knew about how the world worked, about property and punishment, about the way people behaved when their territory was violated. Ryokan stepped past him into the hut. The young thief stood motionless, uncertain whether to run or stay, his body tense as a deer catching human scent. Inside the hut, Ryokan looked around at his few possessions. What could he give this desperate young man? What did he have that might ease whatever suffering had driven him up the mountain in darkness? His sleeping mat? No, he would need that for the cold nights ahead. His cooking pot, essential for the simple meals that sustained him. His writing brushes, these were his livelihood, his way of participating in the world's conversation. Then Ryokan's eyes fell on his robes, the outer layer he wore against the chill. Yes, these he could spare. He removed his outer robe, feeling the cool night air touch his skin through the thin inner garment that remained. The robe was worn but clean, patched but serviceable. He folded it carefully, with the same attention he brought to everything, the same mindfulness he brought to drinking tea or washing his bowl, and walked back outside to where the thief still stood, frozen in confusion. "Here," Ryokan said, holding out the robe. "Please take this. The nights are growing cold, and you have a long walk back down the mountain." The young man's hands trembled as he reached out and took the robe. His eyes filled with tears, whether from shame or gratitude or the shock of unexpected kindness. Who could say? Perhaps all three at once, mixing together the way emotions do when the heart is cracked open by something it never expected to encounter. "Thank you," the thief whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "No need," Ryokan replied softly. "We all do what we must to survive. Go now, before the night grows colder. Be safe on the path." The young man bowed deeply, clutching the robe to his chest, then turned and hurried away down the mountain path, soon disappearing into the darkness beneath the trees. Ryokan stood there for a moment, watching the space where he had vanished, then turned and went back inside his hut. The night air was indeed growing colder now, seeping through his thin inner garment, touching his skin with fingers of frost. Ryokan sat down by the window, the square opening that framed the world like a painting constantly remaking itself. And there, hanging in the autumn sky like a blessing, like a gift that had been waiting all along for him to notice it, was the full moon. It was magnificent, enormous and luminous, turning the landscape below to silver, making the trees cast shadows sharp as calligraphy on the hillside. The moon seemed close enough to touch, present in a way that made everything else, the cold, the loss of his robe, the thief's violation of his space, fade into insignificance. Ryokan sat there for a long time, just watching the moon. His body gradually grew accustomed to the cold, or perhaps he simply stopped noticing it, his attention so completely absorbed in the beauty before him. And then, in that quiet watching, a poem began to form in his mind, words arranging themselves like the moon arranging light, like the night arranging silence. He reached for his brush and wrote, "The thief left it behind the moon at my window," and then he added, speaking to the absent young man as if he might somehow hear across the distance, "Poor fellow, I wish I could have given him this beautiful moon." Can you feel the teaching here, resting beneath you like the earth beneath your bed? Ryokan is not just being kind, though kindness flows through him as naturally as water flows downhill. He is revealing something about the nature of wealth itself, about what can and cannot be stolen, about what is truly valuable and what we only think we need. The thief came seeking material wealth and found a man who had already discovered the greatest treasure, the ability to appreciate beauty, to be fully present to the moment, to receive the world's gifts without needing to own them. The moon at Ryokan's window belonged to him completely, though he owned it not at all. It could never be stolen because it was never possessed. It was simply there, available, infinite in its generosity, shining for everyone and no one. Notice now how your body has grown heavier, how the weight that seemed so solid when you first lay down has begun to dissolve, to become something more like the moonlight itself, present but not grasping, here but not holding. With each breath you are learning what Ryokan knew, that the less you clutch, the more you can receive. The Buddha taught that the secret of health for both mind and body is to live in the present moment wisely and earnestly. Ryokan lived this teaching so completely that even a robbery became an opportunity for presence, for generosity, for the deep appreciation of what cannot be taken away. What moonlight is shining in your life right now that you haven't noticed because you've been too busy guarding what you think you own? What beauty is waiting at your window while you count your possessions and worry about their loss? What richness surrounds you that requires nothing but awareness, nothing but the willingness to look up and see? Feel yourself growing lighter now, releasing the need to protect, to guard, to hold tight to what you have. Like Ryokan giving his robe to the thief, let each exhale be a giving away of what you no longer need. Tension from your shoulders, thoughts from your mind, worries from your heart. Give them all to the night, to the darkness that holds you, to the silence that asks nothing in return. And as you drift deeper towards sleep, imagine yourself sitting by that window with Ryokan, watching the moon transform the world to silver. The cold doesn't matter. The loss doesn't matter. Everything you thought you needed has fallen away. And what remains is this: the moon, the moment, the quiet joy of being alive and awake to beauty. Poor fellow, Ryokan said of the thief. I wish I could have given him this beautiful moon. But perhaps, in a way, he did. Perhaps the young man, walking down the mountain with the robe clutched to his chest, looked up and saw the same moon. Perhaps something in him cracked open, just a little. Perhaps he began to understand that he had tried to steal from the richest man on the mountain and had received freely what money could never buy. Let us walk together now toward the next garden, carrying nothing but this moonlight, this lightness, this understanding that true wealth shines from within and cannot be diminished by loss. Rest here for a moment, in Ryokan's hut, where the cold has become comfortable and the emptiness has become full, where poverty and richness are revealed to be two words for the same generous moon. As we leave the monastery hut, let us journey now to a more perilous landscape, to a place where fear lives and breathes, where danger waits above and below, and where impossibly, miraculously sweetness grows in the narrow space between endings. This is one of the oldest teachings, passed down through generations of seekers, and it speaks to something you know intimately, the feeling of being caught between what was and what will be, suspended in a present moment that seems too fragile to hold you. Your breath is slowing now, deepening, becoming a rhythm as old as walking, as ancient as waves meeting shore. Let us walk together into this next teaching, where a traveler is about to discover that the present moment, however precarious, is the only place where light sweetness can be tasted. Imagine a man traveling alone through wild country, making his way across a vast plain toward distant mountains. The landscape is beautiful in its emptiness. Golden grasses stretching to the horizon, the sky enormous overhead, clouds casting their traveling shadows across the earth. He has been walking for days, his provisions running low, his water skin nearly empty, but he is not worried. The next village lies just beyond the mountains, perhaps 2 more days of travel. Then he hears it, a sound that turns his blood cold, that reaches into the ancient part of his brain where fear lives unquestioned. A roar, deep, rumbling, unmistakable. He turns and sees, emerging from a stand of trees he had passed an hour before, a tiger, enormous, golden and black, moving with the fluid grace of pure predatory purpose. And it has seen him. The man runs. What else can he do? His legs pump beneath him, his heart hammering against his ribs like a fist demanding exit. The grasses whip against his legs, His breath comes in ragged gasps. Behind him, he can hear the tiger closing the distance. It is faster, so much faster, designed for this chase in ways he is not. Ahead, the land begins to break apart. He realizes he is approaching a cliff edge, but he cannot stop, cannot turn back. The tiger is too close now. He can almost feel its breath, can almost sense the muscles gathering for the final leap. The cliff appears suddenly, a sheer drop into a gorge so deep the bottom is hidden in shadow and mist. But there, just at the edge, a vine, thick and strong, growing down the cliff face. Without thinking, without hesitation, the man throws himself over the edge and grasps the vine. His hands close around it, find purchase, hold. His body swings against the rock face, his feet scrambling for holds. He looks up. The tiger has reached the cliff edge. It paces there, snarling, its yellow eyes fixed on him with an intensity that feels almost personal. It cannot reach him. The vine holds. For a moment, the man allows himself a breath of relief, despite the burning in his arms, despite the rough bark cutting into his palms. Then he looks down. At the bottom of the gorge, barely visible in the shadows but unmistakably present, another tiger waits. Perhaps it is the mate of the one above, drawn by the commotion. Perhaps it was already there, making its den in the caves that pock the cliff face. It doesn't matter. What matters is this: above, a tiger; below, a tiger. And here, suspended between earth and sky, between two forms of death, the man clings to a vine. His arms are already growing tired. How long can he hold on? An hour? 2? The strength will leave his fingers eventually. The tiger above or the tiger below in the end? What difference does it make? He is caught. He is finished. Fear crashes over him in waves, each one larger than the last. The Buddha taught, do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future, concentrate the mind on the present moment. But what use is the present moment when the present moment is simply the space between two certain deaths? As the man hangs there, his breathing gradually slows. The initial panic begins to settle, the way silt settles in disturbed water. His body finds a kind of rhythm, a way of holding that requires less desperate effort. And in this slight easing, he notices something. Near his face, growing from a crack in the rock, a wild strawberry plant. It must have taken root in some pocket of soil, must have found enough moisture in the stones weeping to survive. And there, hanging just at eye level, red as a jewel, perfect and ripe, a single strawberry. The man stares at it. Above him, the tiger paces and snarls. Below him, the tiger waits with the patience of stone. His arms tremble with the effort of holding. Death is certain, if not in the next moment, then in the next hour, the next few hours at most. Everything he was, everything he hoped to become, will end here in this gorge. And yet, the strawberry. He reaches out with one hand, feeling the vine shift slightly, his body swinging in space. His fingers close around the fruit. It comes away from the stem with the gentlest tug. He brings it to his mouth and bites. Oh, the sweetness. The taste explodes across his tongue, sweet and tart at once. The flavor of sunshine and rain, of earth and summer, of life itself concentrated in this tiny package of seeds and flesh. The juice runs across his lips. The texture is perfect, neither too soft nor too firm. It is, quite possibly, the most delicious thing he has ever tasted. For this moment, this one moment of tasting the tigers disappear. The cliff disappears. Fear disappears. There is only this. The sweetness on his tongue, the sensation of being alive, the miracle of flavor and texture, and the simple animal pleasure of eating. How sweet it tastes. This is the teaching. Not that we should ignore danger, not that we should pretend our situation is other than it is, but that even suspended between two forms of ending, even in the most precarious of circumstances, life offers its sweetness, and we can choose to taste it. You understand this already, don't you? You know what it feels like to hang between anxieties, the regret behind you, the worry ahead of you, and this narrow present moment that seems too fragile to trust, too temporary to relax into. The mind wants to solve the problem of the tigers. It wants to figure out how to climb back up or find another way down. It wants to plan and strategize and escape from this unresolvable situation. But the body knows something the mind forgets. There is only ever this moment to live in. The strawberry is only ripe now. The sweetness is only available in this breath, this heartbeat, this present instant. Notice now, as you lie here, what strawberries are growing within your reach. Perhaps it is the softness of your pillow against your cheek. Perhaps it is the cool air moving in and out of your lungs, that ancient exchange that sustains you without effort or thought. Perhaps it is the simple fact of rest itself, the way your body knows how to release its weight, how to let go and be held. The tigers are still there, they always are. The tiger of past regrets, pacing and snarling at the edge of memory. The tiger of future anxieties, waiting in the shadows of what might come. And here you are, suspended between them on the vine of this present moment. Your arms are tired, the situation remains unresolved, and yet there is sweetness available right now, if you choose to taste it. Feel yourself growing heavier, sinking deeper. With each exhale, you are learning to hang more gracefully on this vine, to hold with less desperate effort. The strawberry at your lips is the breath itself sweet, life-giving, requiring nothing but your willingness to receive it. There is a deeper teaching hidden in the story, one that reveals itself slowly, like the moon emerging from behind clouds. The man in the story will eventually fall, we all do, in one way or another. The vine cannot hold forever. The tigers represent something true about existence. We are all traveling toward an ending, caught between the death of each passing moment and the uncertainty of what comes next. But what if this precarious suspension is not a problem to be solved, but the very nature of being alive? What if every moment is both an ending and a beginning, both a falling and a flowering? What if the strawberry's sweetness is amplified, not diminished, by its temporary nature? The Zen masters understood this. They taught that impermanence is not life's flaw, but its very essence, not the problem, but the solution. The strawberry tastes sweeter precisely because it will not last. This breath is precious precisely because another is not guaranteed. The present moment glows with intensity precisely because it is already dissolving, already becoming the past. Let us walk together now, you and I, deeper into this understanding. Your body knows how to do this. It is already releasing its grip on what cannot be held, the day that has passed, the future that has not yet arrived. It is learning, breath by breath, how to hang in the present moment with less effort, how to taste the sweetness that is always available when fear loosens its grip on the throat. The two mice in some versions of this story, one white, one black, representing day and night, are already gnawing at the vine. Time is always working at the threads that hold us. This is not news. This is not a problem that can be solved by cleverness or planning or worry. This is simply what is, the condition under which all sweetness becomes possible. And so the man hangs there and tastes the strawberry, and in that tasting he is completely alive, completely present, completely free from the tigers that can only exist in past and future tense. In the present moment, there is only the taste, the texture, the miracle of sensation, the gift of being conscious and aware and capable of experiencing beauty, even especially in impossible circumstances. Feel your jaw relaxing now, your tongue resting soft in your mouth. Feel how your body is already practicing what the story teaches, letting go, moment by moment, of what cannot be controlled. The tigers pace and wait, but they cannot enter this present instant. Here, now, there is only the strawberry. Here, now, there is only the breath. Here, now, there is only the gradual dissolving into rest. As we prepare to leave this cliff face and walk toward the next garden, take one more taste of the strawberry. Let its sweetness fill you completely. Let it remind you that no matter how precarious tomorrow seems, no matter how many tigers wait above and below, there is always this. the immediate experience of being alive, the sensory richness of the present moment, the sweetness that requires nothing but awareness to taste. The man in the story teaches us that the present moment is not a problem to be endured between past and future. It is the only place where life actually happens, where joy is possible, where the strawberry grows and offers itself freely to those who notice it. Rest now in this teaching. Let your grip on the vines soften. The tigers can wait. The future can wait. All that exists is this breath, this heartbeat, this moment's offering of rest and peace and the quiet sweetness of simply being here, alive, aware, and gradually, gracefully falling into sleep. From the cliff's edge where the strawberry offered its teaching, let us walk together now to a quieter place, to a temple courtyard where morning light slants through pine trees and the smell of incense drifts on the still air. Here we will meet a teacher whose insight was so direct, so uncompromising, that he cut through complexity the way a sword cuts through water cleanly, completely, leaving no trace of confusion behind. Feel your body settling even deeper now, becoming part of the surface beneath you, boundaries softening between where you end and the world begins. Let us walk together into the presence of Master Bankai, who lived in 17th century Japan and who discovered something remarkable, that the very nature you seek is already present, has always been present, and cannot be acquired through effort because it was never absent in the first place. The temple courtyard is quiet in the early morning. Dew still clings to the grass, each blade holding its own small jewel of moisture. The wooden floor of the meditation hall is worn smooth by centuries of feet, polished by the passage of countless seekers who came here looking for something they believed was lost. Master Banki sits on a simple cushion, his back straight but not rigid, his face reflecting that peculiar combination of seriousness and humor that marks those who have seen through the world's fundamental joke. A student approaches. He has been at the monastery for several months now, practicing diligently, sitting in meditation until his legs scream with pain, studying the sutras until his eyes blur with fatigue. But he is troubled, deeply troubled, by what he considers to be his greatest obstacle to enlightenment. The student bows deeply and then kneels before Bankai. His face is tight with frustration, his shoulders carrying the weight of his own self-judgment. "Master," he begins, his voice trembling slightly, "I have a terrible temper. It is my worst quality, the thing that prevents me from making any progress on the path. I try to control it, I meditate on patience, I study the teachings on loving kindness, but still this terrible temper arises. Sometimes over the smallest things, a door that sticks, a meal that is cold, another student who breathes too loudly during meditation. The anger comes like a storm, overwhelming everything. I am ashamed of it. It ruins everything. How can I get rid of this terrible temper?" The student's confession hangs in the air between them. Around the courtyard, other students pause in their morning tasks, sweeping, drawing water from the well, tending to the garden. They have heard similar confessions before. Everyone carries some flaw they believe defines them, some obstacle, they are certain, prevents their awakening. Banki listens with complete attention, his eyes resting gently on the troubled student. When the confession is finished, when the last word has fallen like a stone into water, Banki nods slowly. Then he speaks, his voice carrying across the courtyard with perfect clarity. "This is indeed remarkable," Banki says. "A terrible temper is a serious matter. You are right to bring it to me. I would very much like to see this temper of yours. Please show it to me right now." The student blinks, confused. I cannot show it to you right now, Master. It is not present at this moment." "Ah," Banki says, leaning forward slightly, his interest appearing to intensify. "Then perhaps you could bring it forth. If this temper is truly yours, if it truly belongs to you, then surely you can produce it when needed. Please, I am waiting. Show me this terrible temper." The student's confusion deepens. He looks down at his hands, then back at Bankai. "Master, I cannot make it appear just because you ask. The temper comes unexpectedly. When something irritates me, when I am frustrated or tired, then it arises. But I cannot simply create it on command. How interesting, Banki replies, and now there is the slightest suggestion of a smile at the corners of his mouth, though his eyes remain serious, compassionate. So this temper that you claim is yours, this terrible quality that you say you possess, you cannot produce it right now. It only comes, you say, under certain conditions. When you are frustrated, when you are tired, when external circumstances trigger it. Is this correct? Yes, master, that is how it is. Banki sits back, and now his voice becomes even gentler, more intimate, as if he is sharing a secret that only the two of them can hear, though in fact everyone in the courtyard has stopped their tasks to listen. Then how can you say it is yours? If it were truly your nature, if it were truly what you are, it would be present at all times, wouldn't it? You would be able to produce it right now. You would be angry at this very moment. But you are not angry. You are sitting here peacefully, speaking with me, fully present and calm. So where is this terrible temper you claim defines you? The student opens his mouth to respond, then closes it. Something is shifting in his understanding, like tectonic plates moving beneath the surface of thought. Bankai continues, this temper is not your true nature. You were not born with it. When you were an infant, pure and new, did you carry this temper? No. You learned it, created it, constructed it from experiences and thoughts and reactions. And then here is the curious part, you began to identify with it. You began to call it mine. You began to believe it was who you are. The master pauses, letting this truth settle into the silence. A bird calls from somewhere in the garden. The sound of water dripping from the temple roof into a stone basin provides a gentle rhythm, like a heartbeat. The Buddha taught us, no one saves us but ourselves, no one can and no one may. We ourselves must walk the path. But walking the path does not mean fighting with yourself, struggling to eliminate parts of you that you believe are flawed. It means seeing clearly what is true and what is constructed, what is your original nature and what you have added to it. Banki leans forward again, his gaze holding the student with absolute presence. I will tell you what you truly are. You have what I call the unborn Buddha mind. This is your original nature, the awareness that is present right now. Listening to these words, present before thoughts arise, present after thoughts pass away. This unborn mind has no temper. It has no flaws. It is perfectly clear, like a mirror that reflects everything but is stained by nothing. The student's eyes are widening now, something opening in him that perhaps has been closed for a very long time. When conditions arise, fatigue, frustration, hunger thoughts arise. These thoughts say, I am angry. This should not be happening. That person is wrong. And you, in your unborn Buddha mind, notice these thoughts. But then and here is where you create suffering. You claim these thoughts as yourself. You say, I am angry, instead of seeing, there is the thought of anger arising in awareness. You identify with what passes through the mind, instead of resting as the mind itself. Feel this teaching now as you lie here in the darkness. Notice how awareness itself is present, calm, unchanging, while thoughts and sensations arise and pass away within it like clouds crossing the sky. The sky is not troubled by the clouds. It does not identify with them, does not claim them as its nature. It simply allows them to come and go. Your temper, Bankai says to the student, is like a wave on the ocean. When conditions come together, wind, tide, the pull of the moon, a wave arises. But the wave is not separate from the ocean. It is ocean temporarily taking wave form. When the conditions pass, the wave subsides back into ocean nature. And the ocean was never disturbed, never diminished, never made impure by the waves arising. The student is weeping now, but quietly, tears running down his face, not from sadness but from recognition. He is seeing something he has always known but somehow forgot. That beneath all the constructed personality, beneath all the stories about who he is and what is wrong with him, there is something unchanging, something pure, something that was never born and therefore cannot be corrupted. This unborn Buddha mind is your true treasure, Banki continues. It requires no cultivation because it is already perfect. It requires no purification because it was never stained. All the effort you have been making to get rid of your temper, to become someone better, to achieve enlightenment, this effort itself arises in the unborn mind and then disappears back into it, like a ripple on still water. The master stands now, his robes settling around him. He walks to where the student kneels and places a hand gently on his shoulder. From this moment forward, do not try to eliminate your temper. Do not struggle with it or judge yourself for it. Simply recognize that when anger arises, it is not you. It is a temporary pattern of thought and energy, arising in the vast space of your true nature. Watch it the way you would watch a cloud pass across the sky. Notice it, but do not become it. Rest in the unborn mind that watches all things arise and pass away. The student looks up at Bankei, and in his eyes there is a new quality. Not the achieved peace of someone who has conquered their demons, but the natural peace of someone who has discovered they were never at war in the first place. Master, the student asks quietly, how do I practice this? How do I rest in this unborn mind? Bankei laughs, a sound like water over stones, completely natural and unforced. You are already doing it. Right now, as you listen to me, as you breathe, as you see and hear, this is the unborn mind functioning perfectly. You don't need to practice it. You need only to stop practicing everything else. Stop trying to create a better self. Stop struggling with what arises. Simply be as you are and recognize that what you are is already perfect, already whole, already the Buddha nature itself. Let this teaching wash over you now, like water, like moonlight, like the breath that moves through you without effort or intention. You are not your anxiety. You are not your restlessness. You are not your thoughts about tomorrow or your regrets about yesterday. These are weather patterns moving through the vast sky of your true nature, which remains untouched, unchanged, perfectly at peace. The Buddha taught that all conditioned things are impermanent, and Bankei shows us what this means. The anger comes and goes, the sadness arises and passes, the fear appears and dissolves. But that which notices these things, that which is aware of their coming and going, this is your unborn nature, and it is as constant as the space that holds the stars. Feel how your body is releasing now, layer by layer, letting go of the effort to be someone, to become something, to achieve some state different from this one. There is nothing to achieve because you are already what you seek. There is nowhere to go because you are already home. The unborn mind is not something you attain through years of practice. It is what you are when all the practicing stops, when all the striving ceases, when you finally rest as you are. The student in the courtyard stood up that morning transformed, not because he had become someone new, but because he had recognized what he had always been. The terrible temper still arose sometimes, when conditions were right, but now he watched it arise the way you might watch a bird fly past your window, with interest perhaps, but without identification, without the belief that the bird's flight defines who you are. Let us walk together now toward the next garden, carrying this teaching like a lamp that illuminates without burning, that guides without forcing. Your true nature requires no improvement, no cultivation, no achievement. It is already perfect, already present, already shining like the moon that Ryokan could not give to the thief, because it was never his. To give it belongs to everyone and no one, shining freely, asking nothing, offering everything. Rest now in your unborn Buddha mind. Let thoughts arise and pass like clouds. Let sensations come and go like waves. Let the temper, if it comes, appear and dissolve. And you, the vast awareness in which all this happens, remain as you have always been, unborn, undying, untouched by the dance of phenomena, at peace. As we walk together from Bankei's temple courtyard, where the teaching of the unborn mind still reverberates like a bell struck in silence, let us journey now deeper into the mountains, to a place where winter has laid its white blanket over everything, where silence has become so profound it seems to have weight and texture. Here we will meet another master, Hakuin Ikaku, who gave the world one of its most famous riddles, a question that has no answer and yet contains all answers, a sound that cannot be heard and yet echoes through centuries. Your breathing has become so slow now, so gentle, like snow falling on snow, accumulating silence upon silence. Feel how heavy your body has grown, how it seems to be sinking through the surface beneath you, merging with something larger, something that has no edges or boundaries. Let us walk together into the koan, into the impossible question that breaks the mind open like an egg, revealing the vast space that was always inside. The young monk's name has been lost to history, but his struggle is eternal, familiar to anyone who has ever tried to grasp the ungraspable, to solve the unsolvable, to find through effort what can only be discovered through surrender. He had come to Master Hakuin's monastery in the mountains with the fierce determination of youth, ready to throw himself completely into the practice, ready to sacrifice everything for enlightenment. Hakuin was old by then, in his 60s, his face carved by decades of practice into something that seemed almost geological, weathered and timeless, severe and compassionate all at once. He was known for the intensity of his teaching, for pushing students beyond their comfortable limitations, for refusing to accept superficial understanding or intellectual cleverness as substitutes for genuine awakening. On the first day, Hakuin gave the young monk his koan. You know the sound of 2 hands clapping. Now show me the sound of 1 hand. The young monk bowed and returned to his small room, a space barely large enough to contain his sleeping mat and a single cushion for meditation. He sat down and began to work with the koan. The sound of 1 hand. How could 1 hand make a sound? A hand needs something to strike against another hand, a surface, an object. Alone, a hand moves in silence. But this was a koan, not a logic problem. The answer would not come from reasoning. He knew this. All the students knew this. Koans were designed to exhaust the discriminating mind, to drive consciousness beyond the realm where subject and object stood separate, where questions and answers maintained their familiar relationship. Days passed. The young monk sat in the meditation hall with the others, his back straight, his breathing controlled, his mind circling endlessly around the koan like a dog chasing its tail. The sound of 1 hand. The sound of 1 hand. What could it mean? Was it silence? Was it the sound before sound? Was it the potential for sound, the readiness, the poised moment before the clap occurs? He went to Hakuin with each of these answers. Each time, the master listened, his face impassive, and then rang a small bell to dismiss him. Wrong. Try again. The sound of the bell became the sound of his failure, a small bright note of inadequacy that followed him back to his cushion. Weeks became months. The young monk grew thin, obsessed. He sat longer hours, slept less, ate mechanically without tasting. Other students would find him in the garden at odd hours, his hand raised in the air, moving it back and forth, watching it, listening to it with an intensity that bordered on madness. What sound does it make? What sound, what sound, what sound? Winter came to the mountains. Snow began to fall, first in gentle flurries, then in earnest, covering the temple roofs, the garden stones, the paths between buildings. The world became muffled, wrapped in white silence. The meditation hall was cold despite the braziers, breath visible in the air, fingers and toes aching with the chill. The Buddha taught, in the sky, there is no distinction of east and west. People create distinctions out of their own minds and then believe them to be true. But the young monk could not hear this teaching yet. His mind was still creating distinctions, still trying to solve, to achieve, to grasp the ungraspable through the familiar tools of thought and analysis. One night, unable to sleep, the young monk rose from his mat and walked out into the temple garden. It was very late, that deep part of night when even the nocturnal creatures have settled into stillness, when the world seems to hold its breath. Snow was falling steadily now, thick flakes drifting down through the darkness, each one silent, each one adding to the accumulated silence on the ground. He stood there in his thin robes, not feeling the cold, or perhaps feeling it, but no longer caring. The koan had consumed him. It had become his entire world. The sound of one hand, the sound of one hand. His mind was exhausted, worn thin by months of relentless pursuit. He had tried everything he could think of. He had brought Hakuin dozens of answers, poetic answers, philosophical answers, clever answers, desperate answers. Each time, the bell. Wrong. Try again. Now, standing in the falling snow, something in him began to break. Not dramatically, not with any great crisis or catharsis, but quietly, the way ice breaks when spring comes, the way a seed casing splits when the plant inside can no longer be contained. He was tired. So tired. Tired of seeking, tired of trying, tired of himself and his endless mental gymnastics. He raised his hand in the air as he had done 1,000 times before. But this time, he was not trying to hear anything. He was not seeking an answer. He was simply standing in the snow with his hand in the air, because he had been doing this so long that he no longer knew how to stop, no longer knew what else to do. And in that moment of complete exhaustion, complete surrender, when seeking had finally collapsed under its own weight, he heard it, not with his ears. Not as a physical sound traveling through air and striking his eardrums, but he heard it nonetheless clear, unmistakable, more real than any sound that had ever reached him through the ordinary channels of sensation. The sound of one hand was the sound of everything before it splits into perceiver, and perceived, into subject and object, into self and other. It was the sound before the duality that makes ordinary sound possible. It was the sound of consciousness itself, aware and empty, silent and full, nothing and everything happening simultaneously. The young monk stood there as snow continued to fall, each flake landing without sound, and he began to laugh. Not a wild laugh, not hysterical, but quiet, almost wondering. How obvious it was. How completely obvious. He had been looking for something outside himself, some clever answer he could bring to Hakuin like a cat bringing a dead mouse to its owner. But the sound of one hand was not an answer. It was a door that opened when you stopped trying to open it. A truth that revealed itself when you stopped searching for it. He understood now why Hakuin had given him this koan. Not to torture him, not to demonstrate the teacher's superiority, but to drive him to this exact point. The point where the seeking mind exhausts itself, and something else can emerge, something that had been there all along, hidden beneath the noise of effort and striving. The Buddha taught that we must work out our own salvation with diligence. But the young monk now understood that this diligence was not the diligence of accumulation or achievement. It was the diligence of attention, of staying with the question until the questioner himself dissolved, until the one who seeks and the thing sought were revealed to be two names for the same undivided reality. He walked back to his room, brushed the snow from his robes, and sat down on his cushion. The sound was still there, not fading, not diminishing, but present the way silence is present beneath all noise, the way space is present around all objects. He had not gained anything, nothing had been added to him. He had simply stopped obscuring what was already there, the way stepping out of the shadow reveals the sun that was shining all along. In the morning, he requested an interview with Hakuin. The master sat on his cushion as always, his face giving nothing away, his eyes sharp and clear as polished stones. The young monk bowed and sat before him. The sound of one hand, Hakuin said, "Show me." The young monk did not speak. He did not perform any dramatic gesture. He simply sat there, completely present, completely still. And in that stillness, in that perfect presence without separation, he demonstrated the sound. Not as an object to be perceived, but as the very ground of perception itself, the awareness in which all sounds arise and pass away. Hakuin watched him for a long moment. Then, slowly, the severe face softened, and something like warmth appeared in those stone-sharp eyes. He did not ring the bell of dismissal. Instead, he bowed to the young monk. A bow of recognition, of acknowledgement that the barrier had been passed, the gateless gate had been entered. "Tell me," Hakuin said, "what did you hear?" The young monk smiled. "Master, before I can tell you what I heard, you must first show me your ears." This answer showed he truly understood. Sound and hearing are not separate. The hand and its sound are not two things. Subject and object are distinctions created by the mind, useful in the conventional world, but ultimately illusory when we look beneath the surface of things. Feel this now, as you lie here in the darkness. Where is the boundary between you and the silence that surrounds you? Where does the breath end and you begin? Where is the line that separates the one who hears from the sound that is heard? The sound of one hand is not a riddle to be solved, but an invitation to step outside the dualistic framework that structures ordinary consciousness. It asks you to find the place before splitting, the awareness that exists prior to the division of experience into subject and object, self and world, inner and outer. Notice the space between your heartbeats. That space is not empty. It is full of the sound of one hand. Notice the silence beneath your thoughts. That silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of the sound that cannot be heard, because the hearer and the heard have not yet separated into two. Your body knows this already. It is already functioning in the realm of one hand breathing without a breather, heart beating without someone making it beat, awareness aware without anyone doing the being aware. The only one who struggles with the koan is the thinking mind, which cannot comprehend what lies beyond its dualistic structure. Let us walk together now toward the next garden. But notice as we walk that there is no one walking, and no path being walked upon. There is only walking, only the movement itself, undivided, whole, complete. The young monk in the snow discovered that enlightenment is not something you achieve, but something you recognize. The recognition that you are never separate from what you sought, that the seeker and the sought are one hand clapping. Rest now in this understanding, or rather, let understanding rest and simply be what you are. The vast awareness in which the koan and its solution, the question and its answer, the sound and the silence all arise and pass away like snowflakes falling into an infinite empty sky. There is nothing to grasp here, nothing to hold, nothing to achieve. There is only this, the sound of one hand, which is the sound of no hand, which is the sound of all things before they are divided into separate names and forms. Sleep is approaching now like snow accumulating, silent and inevitable. Let it come. Let yourself fall into it, the way the young monk fell into his answer, not by trying, not by seeking, but by finally, completely letting go. The sound of one hand is the sound of this letting go, the sound of boundaries dissolving, the sound of coming home to what you always were. From silence, let us journey to where words dance like fireflies, where wisdom wears the mask of madness, and where a master so unconventional, so willing to break every rule, shows us that true seeing has nothing to do with eyes and everything to do with the heart that opens when certainty dissolves. Your body has become so still now, so receptive, like a pond at dawn before the first breeze touches its surface. Everything that was tight has loosened. Everything that was holding has released. Let us walk together to meet one of Zen's most beloved troublemakers, a monk who wrote poetry in brothels, who questioned every convention, who loved second laughter as much as meditation and silence. His name was Ikkyu Sojun, and the rigid monks of his time called him the Crazy Cloud. But those who truly knew him recognized something else. A heart so vast it could hold contradiction, a mind so free it could not be contained by rules, and a teaching method so direct it bypassed the intellect entirely and struck straight at the soul. It is late afternoon in medieval Japan, in a time when the Zen establishment has grown wealthy and comfortable, when monasteries have become places of political power and social prestige rather than genuine seeking. Ikkyu walks alone by the Kamo River in Kyoto, his robes deliberately shabby, his hair grown long in defiance of monastic custom. He carries no symbols of his rank, though he is in fact a certified Zen master, recognized by his own teacher as having penetrated deeply into the Dharma. But certification means nothing to Ikkyu. Awakening cannot be certified, truth cannot be institutionalized, and the moment Zen becomes respectable, he believes, it has already died. The river flows beside him, steady and unconcerned with human affairs. Willow trees dip their branches toward the water, creating patterns of light and shadow on the current. And there, sitting on the riverbank, he sees them, a small group of blind musicians, 3 men with their instruments, taking a rest from their travels. Their biwa lutas rest against the grass. Their walking sticks lie beside them. They are talking quietly among themselves, their faces turned toward the warmth of the sun they cannot see. Ikkyu approaches them, and something in his footsteps, perhaps the lack of hurry, perhaps the quality of presence, causes them to turn their faces toward him even before he speaks. "Good afternoon, travelers," Ikkyu says, his voice warm and unhurried. "May I join you for a moment?" Of course," says the eldest of the 3, a man whose face is weathered but peaceful, whose sightless eyes seem nonetheless to look directly at Ikkyu. "Please, sit. The grass is soft here, and the sound of the river is pleasant company." Ikkyu settles down beside them, arranging his robes around him. For a while, they simply sit together in companionable silence, listening to the river's constant conversation with itself, feeling the afternoon warmth on their faces. Then, one of the younger musicians speaks. "Tell us, friend, for we cannot see it ourselves, what does the sunset look like today? We have heard so many descriptions of sunsets, and each person sees them differently. What colors paint the sky where you are?" This is the moment. A conventional person might describe the colors orange and pink, gold and purple, the gradations of light as day surrenders to evening. A poet might reach for metaphors, the sky like a ripe peach, like molten copper, like the inside of a conch shell. But Ikkyu is neither conventional nor merely poetic. He is a teacher, even here by the riverside, even in this casual encounter with strangers who will never know his name or reputation. The Buddha taught, "It is a man's own mind, not his enemy or foe, that lures him to evil ways." But Ikkyu understood this teaching in its full depth, that the mind creates not only evil, but all the divisions and separations that make us suffer, including the separation between those who see and those who do not, between the sighted and the blind. Ikkyu is quiet for a long moment, really looking at the sunset now, not to describe it, but to truly perceive it. The sky is indeed magnificent streaks of crimson and amber, clouds edged in gold, the whole western horizon ablaze with the day's ending. But how can he convey this to men who have never seen color, who have no visual reference points, who live in a world of sound and texture and temperature? Then he listens to their breathing, to the way they hold their instruments even at rest, to the quality of attention in their faces. These are musicians. They live in a world of sound, of vibration, of the invisible waves that travel through air and touch the soul directly without passing through the eyes at all. "Listen," Ikkyu says softly. "The light right now sounds like your music when it reaches that quiet part. You know the part one mean? When the notes hang in the air like golden dust, when the sound is so delicate you can almost see it floating there between earth and sky." The 3 musicians grow very still. One of them tilts his head, as if listening to something just beyond the range of hearing. "The sunset sounds," Ikkyu continues, "like the lowest note on your biwa, the one that resonates in your chest, that warm, deep tone that feels like the earth humming to itself. That's the orange near the horizon. And above it, the pink sounds like the higher strings, lighter, sweeter, like a woman's voice calling from a distance." The youngest musician nods slowly, his fingers moving unconsciously, as if playing invisible strings, translating Ikkyu's words back into the language he knows best. "And the gold," Ikkyu says, warming to his subject now, finding unexpected joy in this translation between senses. "The gold sounds like the moment when all your instruments play together in perfect harmony, when the notes align so perfectly that they seem to create a shimmer in the air, a vibration. That makes the heart open without knowing why." The Buddha taught that there is no path to happiness, that happiness is the path itself. And here, by the river, Ikkyu is demonstrating this teaching. He could pity these men for their blindness, could feel superior in his ability to see what they cannot, but instead, he is honoring their way of perceiving, translating the visual world into their native language, showing them that seeing and hearing are not fundamentally different. Both are ways of receiving the world, both are vibrations interpreted by consciousness, both are ultimately occurring in the same unified field of awareness. There is a silence in the sunset too, Ikkyu adds, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Do you know the silence that comes between notes? Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something else, something that holds the notes apart and also binds them together. Yes, says the eldest musician, his face lighting up with recognition. Yes, we know this silence. It is the space that makes the music possible. Exactly, Ikkyu says. The deep blue of the sky, the color that appears as the sun sinks lower, that is the silence between your notes. It is dark and vast and somehow full. It doesn't compete with the other colors, the brighter ones. It simply holds them, gives them a space in which to shine. The three musicians sit with this, digesting it, translating it back into their own experience. And then something remarkable happens. The youngest one picks up his biwa and begins to play, very softly, a few notes low and resonant, then higher and lighter, then a shimmering combination of strings that does indeed create a kind of golden vibration in the air. He is playing the sunset, or rather, he is playing what Ikkyu has described, but in doing so, he is creating his own sunset, one made of sound instead of light. The other two musicians join in, the instruments weaving together, creating something that is neither quite music nor quite description, but some third thing, a synthesis, a bridge between the world of sight and the world of sound. And Ikkyu sits there listening, his eyes closed now, for what need does he have of sight in this moment? And he realizes that they are teaching him something too. They are showing him that the divisions between the senses are arbitrary, that beauty is not trapped in any single mode of perception, that the blind can see in ways that transcend mere vision, and that perhaps true seeing has never been about eyes at all. The Buddha taught that we should concentrate the mind on the present moment, and this is what is happening here. Not as an exercise, not as a discipline, but as a natural flowering of attention when it is given fully, without the interference of preconception or judgment. Ikkyu is not thinking about these musicians as disabled or limited. The musicians are not lamenting what they lack. All of them are simply here, by the river, sharing this moment of sunset and sound, each contributing what they have, each receiving what the others offer. When the music fades, when the last note hangs in the air and then dissolves back into the sound of the river, into the rustle of willow leaves, into the vast silence that holds all sounds, the four men sit together in a fullness that needs no words. Finally, the eldest musician speaks. Thank you, friend. That was the most beautiful sunset I have ever experienced. Ikkyu laughs, that spontaneous laugh of his that scandalized the proper monks but delighted everyone else. And it was the most beautiful music I have ever seen, he replies. They understand each other perfectly. They have crossed the bridge between seeing and hearing and found that on the other side there is no difference. There is only perception, only consciousness, receiving the world in whatever form it arrives, only the heart opening to beauty, regardless of the door through which it enters. Feel this teaching now as you lie in darkness. Your eyes are closed or nearly so. You are living in the world of the blind musicians, where sight has no dominion, where other senses come forward to guide you. Can you hear the sunset in the quality of silence around you? Can you feel the moonlight, even though you cannot see it? Can you sense the vast space of night, the way the blind musicians sense the space between notes? True seeing, Ikkyu teaches us, is not dependent on eyes. It is the capacity to be fully present to whatever is, to receive the world without the filter of preconception, to recognize beauty in whatever form it takes. The blind musicians could not see the colors, but they could experience the sunset fully because Ikkyu helped them translate it into their own language. And in doing so, they helped him see that he had been trapped in his own language, the language of sight, thinking it was the only way to experience that particular beauty. Let us walk together toward the next garden now, but notice how we are walking. Are we seeing the path with our eyes, Or are we feeling our way forward with some other sense, some deeper knowing? The darkness around you is not an obstacle to perception. It is an invitation to perceive differently, to discover senses you didn't know you had, to find that awareness itself is prior to any particular sensory channel. Your body is growing so heavy now, sinking so deeply into rest. Let it sink. Let the weight increase. You are learning what the blind musicians know, that you can navigate perfectly well without relying on what you think you must have. That limitation in one area opens up expansiveness in another. That darkness is not the absence of light, but a different kind of presence. Ikkyu walked away from that riverside encounter changed, though he would never have admitted it. He had set out to teach and found himself taught. He had offered a gift and received one in return. This is the way of true exchange, true meeting, when neither person is higher or lower, when the teacher and student roles flow back and forth like the river beside which they sat, when blindness and sight are revealed to be temporary conditions of consciousness rather than absolute states of being. The crazy cloud drifts on, toward the next encounter, the next teaching, the next opportunity to break down the walls that separate us from each other and from the truth. And the three musicians continue their journey too, carrying with them a sunset made of sound, a gift from a stranger whose name they never learned, but whose presence they will never forget. Rest now in this understanding. You don't need to see to perceive. You don't need to understand to know. You don't need anything except this willingness to be present, to receive, to let the world touch you through whatever door it chooses. The sunset is happening inside you right now, golden and warm, and slowly fading into the deep blue silence that holds all colors, all sounds, all experiences in its vast embrace. Sleep is the ultimate blindness, the ultimate surrender of the eye's dominion. And yet in sleep we see dreams. We perceive without sight. We know without thinking. We travel without moving. Let yourself drift toward that country now. That place where the blind are guides and the crazy cloud laughs beside the river. And the sunset sounds like music that was always playing, always waiting for you to stop looking. And finally, truly, see. The night has deepened now, and we have journeyed through many gardens, met many teachers, heard many teachings that point beyond words to the wordless truth beneath. Your breathing has become so slow, so peaceful, like the tide going out on a moonless night, leaving the shore smooth and unmarked. Let us walk now to meet a teacher whose name most have never heard, a woman whose wisdom was so profound that even the great masters came to sit at her feet, though history has tried to forget her, though the records kept by men barely mention her existence. Her name was Moku, which means silent tree, and she lived in a small hermitage on the slope of Mount Hiei, far from the great monasteries where monks debated fine points of doctrine and competed for recognition and rank. She had taken her vows young, after a life of terrible suffering, and had found in that suffering a gateway to something vast and luminous that she could never adequately name, but could only point toward with her presence, with her silence, with the way she moved through the world as if walking on water. It is early spring, and the mountain is coming alive after winter's long sleep. Cherry blossoms have begun to open, pale pink against the dark branches, each flower a small miracle of impermanence, here for such a brief time before the petals scatter in the wind. Moku sits outside her hermitage, a structure so simple it is barely more than a roof and 4 walls, a place to sleep and sit and be protected from the rain. She is mending her robe with careful stitches, each movement deliberate and unhurried, as if she has all the time in the world, as if there is nowhere else to be and nothing else to do but this thread passing through fabric, needle pulling, the small repair that keeps the garment whole. Down the mountain path, struggling upward through the trees, comes a young woman. She is perhaps 20 years old, her face beautiful but marked by a deep sadness that has settled into her features like a shadow that will not lift. Her name is Ayame, which means iris, and she has walked for 3 days to reach this hermitage, driven by a desperation that gives her strength beyond her physical capacity. 6 months ago, Ayame's husband died. He was young, barely 25, a fisherman who went out one morning and did not return. His boat was found later, capsized, empty. His body was never recovered by the sea that took him. And Ayame, who had loved him with all the fierce devotion of youth, who had built her entire life around their future together, found herself suddenly alone, her world shattered, her purpose dissolved. She tried to continue. She went through the motions of living, eating when she remembered to eat, sleeping when exhaustion forced her into unconsciousness, working to support herself through the endless empty days. But the grief was too large, too consuming. It filled every space inside her until there was no room left for anything else. No room for hope, no room for joy, no room even for the simple pleasure of sunlight on skin or the taste of good food. People in her village tried to help. They brought her meals, offered her work, spoke words meant to comfort. Time heals all wounds, they said. He would want you to be happy, they said. You are young, you will love again, they said. But their words only made the ache worse, because they did not understand. They could not understand. They had not loved as she loved. They had not lost what she lost. They spoke from a place of wholeness to someone who was broken, and their words could not bridge that gap. Then she heard about Moku from a traveling monk who passed through her village. He spoke of a woman on the mountain who had herself known terrible loss, who understood grief in a way that the comfortable could never understand, who could sit with suffering without trying to fix it or explain it away. So Ayame set out, carrying nothing but a small bundle of rice cakes and the weight of her sorrow. Now she approaches the hermitage, her legs aching from the climb, her breath coming hard. She sees Moku sitting there, sewing, apparently unaware of her approach or simply unconcerned. Ayame stops a respectful distance away and bows deeply. "Teacher," she says, her voice rough from crying and from days of silence. "I have come seeking help." Moku looks up from her sewing, and her eyes, dark and clear and somehow depthless, take in this young woman, this grief carrier, this broken heart standing on her mountain. She does not smile. She does not offer false comfort. She simply nods and gestures to a spot on the ground beside her. "Sit," she says. Just that one word, soft as falling petals. Ayame sits, and for a long moment they are both silent. Moku returns to her sewing, and Ayame watches her hands moving, pull the thread, make the stitch, pull again. There is something hypnotic about the rhythm, something that begins to quiet the frantic churning in Ayame's mind. Finally, Ayame speaks. "My husband died 6 months ago. I cannot stop grieving. I cannot move forward. Everyone tells me I should accept it, let it go, move on with my life. But I don't know how. The pain is too great. It is eating me alive from the inside. Please, teacher, tell me how to make it stop." The Buddha taught that life is suffering, that suffering arises from attachment, and that there is a path to the cessation of suffering. But Moku knows something that is often forgotten in the teaching, that the path through suffering is not around it or over it, but directly through its center, into the heart of the pain itself, into the place where we discover that we are large enough to hold even this, vast enough to contain even that, unbearable. Moku sets down her sewing and turns to face Ayame fully. "Tell me about him," she says. "Tell me about your husband." This is not what Ayame expected. She expected teachings, techniques, meditation instructions, some method for releasing attachment or transforming pain. But Moku is asking her to do the opposite, to move toward the grief, not away from it, to speak the name that she has been afraid to speak, because speaking it makes the loss too real. "His name was Kenji," Ayame begins, and her voice breaks immediately, tears spilling down her cheeks. But Moku simply nods, encouraging her to continue, and so she does. She tells Moku everything, how they met, how he courted her, how they married against her father's wishes, because her father wanted her to marry a merchant's son, someone safe, someone who would not risk his life on the ocean every day. She tells Moku about the way Kenji laughed, about his hands rough from pulling nets and ropes, about the songs he would sing when he thought no one was listening. She tells her about their plans, the children they would have, the house they would build, the life they were going to create together. She tells her about the last morning, how he kissed her goodbye, how she had felt a sudden fear and asked him not to go, and how he had laughed and said the sea was calm, there was nothing to worry about. And as she speaks, as the words pour out of her in a flood that has been dammed up for 6 months, something begins to happen. The grief is still there. It will always be there. Moku knows this. But it begins to change shape, to transform from a crushing weight into something else, something that has texture and dimension and even, strangely, a kind of beauty. Moku listens without interrupting, without offering platitudes or solutions. She simply receives Ayame's words the way the earth receives rain, absorbing them, holding them, letting them soak in. And when Ayame finally falls silent, exhausted, emptied, Moku speaks. "You are asking the wrong question," she says gently. "You ask how to make the pain stop. But pain is not the problem. Pain is simply pain. It arises because you loved deeply, because your heart opened fully to another person, because you allowed yourself to be vulnerable and tender and completely human. The pain is the price of having loved. Would you wish you had never loved him if it meant you would not feel this pain now?" Ayame shakes her head violently. "No, never. Loving him was the best thing in my life." "Then the pain is part of that love," Moku says. "It is not separate from it. It is not a punishment or a problem to be solved. It is the shape that love takes when the beloved is gone. Do you understand?" Ayame is weeping openly now, but differently than before. These are not the desperate tears of someone drowning, but the cleansing tears of someone beginning to understand something essential, something that changes everything while changing nothing. "The Buddha taught that attachment causes suffering," Moku continues, "and this is true, but it is misunderstood. People think it means we should not love, should not care, should not open our hearts. They think detachment means becoming cold and indifferent. But true detachment is not the absence of love. It is the presence of love without the need to control or possess or make permanent what is inherently impermanent." She pauses, letting this sink in, then continues. "You cannot make the pain stop, Ayame, but you can change your relationship to it. Right now, you are fighting it, resisting it, trying to push it away. And this fighting is what makes it unbearable. The pain itself is just pain. It rises and falls like waves on the ocean. But your resistance to it, your belief that you should not feel it, your fear that it will destroy you, this is what creates the suffering." Moku stands and walks a few steps to where a cherry tree grows beside the hermitage. Petals are falling from its branches, drifting down in the slight breeze, landing on the ground like pink snow. "Look at these blossoms," she says. "They are beautiful, yes? But their beauty is inseparable from their impermanence. They bloom for such a short time, and then they fall. If the tree tried to hold on to its blossoms, tried to keep them from falling, what would happen? The blossoms would wither on the branches, would turn brown and ugly, would eventually have to fall anyway. But because the tree lets them go, because it does not cling, the falling itself becomes beautiful. The petals scatter in the wind, they float on water, they carpet the ground in pink. Their impermanence is not a flaw in their beauty, it is the very source of their beauty." She turns back to Ayame. "Your love for Kenji was like these blossoms. It bloomed, it was beautiful, and then it ended. Not because there was something wrong with it, but because all things end. This is the nature of existence, and the grief you feel this too will eventually fall away, not because you have forgotten him or stopped loving him, but because grief also is impermanent, also changes form, also transforms over time." Ayame is listening with her whole body now, her tears still flowing but her breath easier, her shoulders less tight. "But how do I live with it?" she asks. "How do I wake up every morning knowing he is gone?" Moku returns to her seat and picks up her sewing again. "The same way I am mending this robe," she says. "One stitch at a time, one breath at a time, one moment at a time. You do not have to carry the weight of all your future mornings right now. You only have to carry this morning, this moment, this single breath." She holds up the robe, showing Ayame the careful stitches. "You see this tear? It happened. I cannot make it unhappen, but I can repair it. The robe will never be exactly as it was before the tear. You can still see where it was damaged if you look closely, but it is still whole. It still functions. It still keeps me warm. Your heart is like this robe. It has been torn. The tear is real. I do not minimize it or tell you it does not matter. But you can repair it, not by pretending the damage never happened, but by carefully, patiently, stitch by stitch, learning to be whole again in a new way. The Buddha taught loving kindness, compassion for all beings. But Moku understood that this compassion must begin with ourselves, with our own wounded hearts, with the gentle acceptance of our own pain as valid and real and worthy of tenderness. They sit together as the afternoon lengthens, as shadows grow longer across the mountain, as more cherry blossoms fall and fall and fall. Moku does not send Ayame away. She does not declare the teaching finished. She simply continues her sewing, and Ayame sits beside her breathing, watching the petals fall, feeling something in her chest that has been clenched tight for 6 months begin, slowly to soften. "Stay with me for a few days if you wish," Moku says finally. "Help me tend the garden. Sit with me in meditation. Learn to be with your grief instead of running from it. You will find that what you have been afraid of, that the pain will destroy you, is not true. You are much larger than your grief. You contain it. It does not contain you. Feel this teaching now as you rest in the darkness. What pain have you been carrying? What grief have you been trying to push away? Can you breathe into it instead of away from it? Can you make space for it the way Moku made space for Ayame's sorrow? Receiving it without trying to fix it, holding it without being consumed by it. Your body knows how to do this. Every injury it has sustained, it has healed not by pretending the injury never happened, but by slowly, patiently, stitch by stitch, knitting the torn tissue back together. The scars remain, but they are not weaknesses. They are proof of the body's capacity to repair itself, to become whole again in a new form. Let yourself be the cherry tree, releasing what must fall, trusting that this release is not a failure, but a fulfillment, not an ending, but a transformation. Let yourself be Moku's robe, torn but being mended, damaged but still whole, imperfect but still beautiful, still functional, still worthy. And as sleep approaches now like the softest rain, like petals falling on still water, let yourself sink into it with the understanding that grief and joy are not opposites but companions, that pain and love are two faces of the same capacity to feel deeply, to care profoundly, to be fully, courageous, asli, magnificently alive. The mountain holds Moku's hermitage in its ancient arms. The cherry blossoms continue their endless falling, and Ayame, learning to breathe again, learning to be with what is instead of fighting for what was, takes her first steps on the pathless path. The way through that goes directly into the center of pain and emerges on the other side not untouched, but transformed, not unmarked, but whole. We have walked through many gardens now, through snow and cherry blossoms, through riverside encounters and mountain hermitages. Your body has become so still, so soft, like clay, that has been worked by gentle hands until all resistance has melted away. The stories are working on you in ways deeper than understanding, planting seeds in soil you did not know you contained. Let us journey now to meet a master whose teaching was so simple, so direct, that most people missed it entirely, looking for complexity where there was only clarity, searching for profundity where there was only presence. His name was Ryokan, and he lived alone in a small hut on Mount Kugami, a dwelling so humble that rain dripped through the roof and wind whistled through the walls. He owned almost nothing: one robe, one bowl, a few books of poetry. He had been a monk in his youth, trained in the rigorous discipline of a Zen monastery, but he had left that world behind, finding that true practice had nothing to do with institutions or hierarchies or the accumulation of spiritual credentials. Instead, he spent his days in simplicity, begging for his food in the village below, playing with children, writing poetry, sitting in meditation beneath the trees. It is summer now, and the mountain is lush and green, heavy with the sounds of insects and birds, thick with the smell of earth and growing things. Ryokan sits outside his hut, watching a line of ants carry tiny pieces of leaf across the path. He has been watching them for perhaps an hour. completely absorbed in their purposeful journey, their cooperation, their absolute dedication to the task at hand. This is his meditation today. Not formal sitting, not deliberate concentration, but simple attention given fully to what is happening right now, right here, in this exact moment. He hears footsteps approaching up the mountain path, heavy, determined footsteps, the sound of someone climbing with effort and purpose. Ryokan continues watching the ants, but part of his awareness extends toward the approaching visitor, curious but not concerned, open but not expectant. The man who emerges from the trees is perhaps 50 years old, dressed in the robes of a successful merchant, his face showing the comfortable prosperity of someone who has done well in the world. His name is Tanaka, and he has come seeking wisdom, though he would be hard-pressed to say exactly what wisdom means or why he believes this eccentric hermit might possess it. Tanaka has everything a man could want by conventional measures. He has wealth. His business importing silk and ceramics has made him rich. He has status. People in the city bow to him, seek his favor, compete for his attention. He has a wife, children, grandchildren, a large house filled with beautiful things. And yet, for reasons he cannot articulate, he is profoundly unhappy. There is a restlessness in him, a dissatisfaction that gnaws at him in quiet moments, that wakes him in the middle of the night with a vague anxiety about everything and nothing. He has tried various solutions. He has increased his charitable giving, thinking perhaps he would find satisfaction in generosity. He has acquired new possessions, thinking perhaps the next beautiful object would finally fill the emptiness. He has pursued various pleasures, thinking perhaps he simply had not found the right source of joy. Nothing has worked. The emptiness remains, and with it, a growing desperation. So he has come to Ryokan, having heard stories of the strange monk who lives in poverty but seems somehow content, who owns nothing but appears to lack nothing, who has renounced everything that Tanaka has spent his life accumulating. Master Ryokan, Tanaka says, bowing formally, I have come seeking your guidance. Ryokan looks up from the ants, his face gentle and slightly amused. I am not a master, he says mildly. I am just Ryokan. But you are welcome. Sit, if you like. Tanaka settles himself on the ground, though his expensive robes are not suited to sitting in the dirt, and immediately launches into his prepared speech. I am a successful merchant. I have worked hard all my life. I have provided well for my family. I have achieved everything I set out to achieve, but I am not happy. There is an emptiness inside me that nothing seems to fill. I have heard that you understand the way to contentment, to peace of mind. Please teach me. What must I do? The Buddha taught that the root of suffering is craving, the endless wanting that can never be satisfied because it is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of reality. But Ryokan knows that this teaching, stated as doctrine, will not help Tanaka. He needs to discover the truth for himself, needs to see it directly rather than simply believing it on authority. Ryokan is quiet for a long moment, apparently considering the question. Then he says, I am very thirsty. Would you bring me some water from the stream? There is a dipper hanging by the path just down there. Tanaka blinks, surprised. This is not what he expected. He came for profound wisdom, spiritual instruction, and he is being asked to fetch water. But he is a polite man, and Ryokan is his elder. So he rises and walks down the path until he finds the stream, a small clear flow of water running over smooth stones. The dipper hangs from a branch exactly where Ryokan said it would be. Tanaka dips it into the stream, filling it with cold, clear water. He begins walking back up the path toward Ryokan's hut, being careful not to spill, focusing his attention on keeping the dipper level, on placing his feet carefully on the uneven ground, and as he walks, something strange happens. The restlessness that has plagued him for months, that constant churning anxiety and dissatisfaction, quiets. Not completely, not permanently, but for these moments of walking with the water, there is only this, the weight of the dipper, the coolness of the water against his hand, the sound of his footsteps on the path, the dappled sunlight through the leaves overhead. He is not thinking about his business, not worrying about his family, not questioning the meaning of his life. He is simply walking, carrying water, completely present to this simple task. He arrives back at the hut and hands the dipper to Ryokan, who drinks deeply, then smiles. "Ah, that is good. Thank you. The water from that stream is particularly sweet." Tanaka sits down again, and immediately the restlessness returns, the mind starting up its familiar patterns of dissatisfaction and seeking. He opens his mouth to repeat his question, to ask again for the teaching, but Ryokan speaks first. "Did you notice," he says casually, "how you felt while you were walking with the water?" Tanaka pauses, thinking back. Yes, I was focused on not spilling it. I was paying attention to each step." "And in those moments," Ryokan asks, "were you unhappy?" Tanaka considers this carefully. "No," he says slowly. "No, I was not unhappy. But I was not particularly happy either. I was just doing the task." "Just doing the task," Ryokan repeats, savoring the words. "Yes, just walking, just carrying, just being completely present to what you were doing. This is the teaching you came for, though you do not recognize it yet." He gestures around them at the trees, the sky, the small hut, the ants still marching across the path. "Look at all this. Look at how simple it is. The trees do not wish they were taller or fuller. The stream does not wish it flowed faster or slower. The ants do not question whether their work has meaning. They simply do what is theirs to do, completely, without reservation or complaint." Tanaka frowns slightly. "But surely human beings are different from trees and streams and ants. We have consciousness, self-awareness, the ability to reflect on our lives and ask whether they have meaning." "Yes," Ryokan agrees, "and this is both our gift and our curse. This self-awareness can lead to wisdom, but more often it leads to what you are experiencing. A constant evaluation and judgment of our lives, an endless comparison between what is and what we think should be, a perpetual dissatisfaction based on the gap between reality and our ideas about how reality should be different." He picks up a small stone and holds it in his palm. "Tell me, is this stone happy or unhappy?" "Neither," Tanaka says. "It is just a stone." "Exactly. It is just a stone. It does not need to be happy to be complete, to be exactly what it is, to fulfill its nature perfectly. And you, when you were just walking, just carrying water, just doing what was in front of you to do, you were like this stone, complete, whole, not needing to be anything other than what you were in that moment." The Buddha taught right action, right speech, right livelihood, all the components of the Noble Eightfold Path. But Ryokan understood that right does not mean morally correct or spiritually superior. It means complete, whole, undivided. It means doing what you are doing with your whole being, not half-heartedly, not while wishing you were doing something else, not while judging yourself or comparing yourself to others. "But I cannot spend my whole life just carrying water," Tanaka protests. "I have responsibilities. I have a business to run, a family to care for. I cannot retreat to a mountain and live in simplicity like you do." Ryokan laughs, a sound like water over stones, natural and unforced. "I am not telling you to live like me. I am not telling you to do anything at all. I am simply pointing out what you already discovered for yourself, that happiness is not found in accumulation or achievement or any external circumstance. It is found in being completely present to whatever you are doing, whether that is walking with water or conducting business or eating dinner with your family." He sets down the stone and looks directly at Tanaka with eyes that are clear and kind and somehow ancient, despite his relatively young appearance. "You asked what you must do to find contentment. But contentment is not something you do. It is what remains when you stop doing all the extra things, all the worrying, all the comparing, all the evaluating and judging and trying to make life different from what it is. When you were walking with the water, you stopped all that extra activity. You just walked. And the contentment was there, not because you created it, but because you stopped obscuring it." Tanaka sits with this, turning it over in his mind. It sounds too simple to be true. Surely the answer to his profound unhappiness cannot be something as mundane as paying attention, while performing simple tasks. As if reading his thoughts, Ryokan says, "The mind wants complexity. It wants profound teachings, elaborate practices, difficult achievements. Because if the truth is complex and difficult, then we have an excuse for not living it. We can say, 'I am working on it. I am not ready yet. I need more time, more study, more preparation.' But if the truth is simple, just be present, just do what you are doing completely, then we have no excuse. We can do that right now, in this moment. And that is terrifying to the ego, which wants to remain in control, which wants to make spirituality into another project, another achievement, another thing to accumulate." He stands and stretches, his movements unhurried and graceful. "Stay for a while if you wish. Help me with some tasks around the hut. We can fix that hole in the roof. We can weed the small garden. We can walk down to the village for the evening meal. Not as spiritual practice, not as meditation, just as doing what needs to be done. And perhaps you will notice something." They spend the rest of the afternoon together. Tanaka, who has not done manual labor in years, who has servants to handle such things, finds himself up on the roof with Ryokan, replacing damaged thatch, his expensive robes getting dirty, his hands getting scratched by the rough reeds, and something in him, some tight, defended part that has been locked away for decades, begins to soften. There is something deeply satisfying about this work, not because it is particularly meaningful or important, but because it is concrete, immediate, real. He can see the results of his efforts. The hole gets smaller, then closes completely. The roof becomes sound again. Rain will not drip through. It is a small thing, an utterly mundane thing, but it is complete. Whole. Done. As the sun begins to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, they climb down from the roof. Ryokan looks at their work and nods with satisfaction. Good. That will last another season at least. Then he turns to Tanaka. "Thank you for your help. It is much easier with two people." Tanaka realizes he is smiling, really smiling, for the first time in months. His back aches, his hands are sore, he is dirty and tired, and yet he feels lighter somehow, more present, more alive than he has felt in years. "I think I understand," he says slowly, "or at least I am beginning to understand. It is not about what I do or do not have. It is about how I am with what is already here." "Yes," Ryokan says simply, "the stream was always sweet. You just had to taste it." Feel this teaching now as you rest in the growing darkness. Notice the simple fact of breathing air entering, air leaving. Notice the weight of your body against what supports it. Notice the temperature of the air on your skin. These simple sensations, usually ignored in favor of thoughts and worries and plans, are actually doorways to the contentment that Tanaka sought, the peace that Ryokan embodied. You do not need to achieve anything to be worthy of this peace. You do not need to become someone different or better or more spiritual. You only need to stop obscuring what is already present. The simple miracle of being alive, aware, able to experience this moment exactly as it is. Let your body teach you what Ryokan taught Tanaka. Your body knows how to be completely present to what it is doing. When you are thirsty, it drinks without questioning whether the water is good enough or wishing it were different. When you are tired, it sleeps without judging itself or comparing its rest to anyone else's rest. Your body is always in the present moment, always complete, always whole. And as sleep approaches now, as consciousness begins to blur and soften at the edges, let yourself be like the water. Tanaka carried cool and clear and sweet, flowing naturally from source to destination, not resisting, not grasping, just being what it is, going where it goes, fulfilling its nature, completely without effort or strain. The mountain holds Ryokan's simple hut in its ancient embrace. The roof is repaired, solid for another season, and somewhere, walking back down the mountain path in the gathering dusk, a wealthy merchant carries something more valuable than all his silks and ceramics. The memory of a few moments of complete presence, a taste of the sweet water that flows always and everywhere, waiting only for us to stop, to bend down, to drink. The night has grown very deep now, and we have traveled far together through these gardens of awakening. Your breathing is so slow and steady that it seems almost to have stopped, as if you are suspended between sleeping and waking, between the world of form and the formless realm that underlies it. Let us make one more journey before you drift completely into sleep's embrace. One more meeting with a teacher whose lesson comes not through words or actions, but through silence itself, through the eloquent emptiness that speaks more clearly than any doctrine. Her name was Soshin, though she was known by many as the Silent One, and she lived in a time of great upheaval when wars swept across Japan like terrible storms, destroying temples and scattering communities of monks and nuns to the winds. She had been the abbess of a small convent before the soldiers came, before the buildings were burned and the women forced to flee into the mountains. Many of her students died in that flight, from cold, from hunger, from the violence that pursued them. Soshin herself survived, but something in her broke during those terrible months. Or perhaps it would be more accurate to say that something in her broke open, revealing a vast silence that had always been there beneath the surface of ordinary consciousness. After the wars finally ended, after the land began to recover and rebuild, Soshin did not return to institutional life. She could not. The forms and rituals that had once seemed so important now appeared empty to her, hollow shells that missed the essential truth they were meant to contain. Instead, she built herself a small shelter in a forest glade, far from any village or town, and there she lived in almost complete silence, speaking perhaps a dozen words in an entire year, communicating through gesture and presence and the profound stillness that radiated from her like light from a lamp. But word of her spread, as such things do. People began to seek her out, monks puzzled by her reputation, lay people struggling with suffering, seekers of all kinds drawn by something they could not name but somehow recognized. And Soshin received them all with the same gentle silence, the same profound acceptance, offering no teachings, no instructions, no words of wisdom, yet somehow transmitting something that changed those who sat with her. It is autumn now, and the forest around Soshin's shelter blazes with color, maple leaves turning crimson and gold, ginkgo leaves like scattered coins of purest yellow. The air has grown crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke from distant villages. Soshin sits outside her shelter on a smooth stone, her hands resting quietly in her lap, her face peaceful and still as a pond at dawn. Through the trees comes a man, middle-aged, his face lined with worry and exhaustion. His name is Takeshi, and he is a scholar, a man who has spent his entire life in the world of words and concepts, who makes his living as a scribe and teacher, copying sutras and explaining their meanings to students. He has read everything: the Buddhist scriptures, the Confucian classics, the Taoist texts, the poetry of the great masters. His mind is vast and well furnished, stocked with knowledge like a wealthy merchant's warehouse stocked with goods. But lately, something has shifted. The words that once seemed so full of meaning have begun to feel hollow. He reads the sutras he has read 100 times before, and they seem like empty sounds, syllables strung together without substance. He tries to teach his students, and his own voice sounds false to him, like an actor reciting lines in a play he no longer believes in. He has come to Soshin because he has heard that she does not teach with words, and perhaps, he thinks, perhaps what he needs is something beyond words, something his vast learning has somehow missed. He arrives at the clearing and sees her sitting there, the small elderly woman in plain robes, unremarkable in every way except for the quality of stillness that surrounds her, like an atmosphere, like a field of force that can be felt even at a distance. He approaches and bows formally. "Venerable Soshin," he begins, "I am Takeshi, a scholar and teacher of the Dharma. I have come seeking—" She raises one hand gently, stopping him. Her eyes meet his, and in that gaze there is no judgment, no evaluation, only a kind of vast acceptance that takes him in completely, sees him fully, without needing to categorize or understand or make sense of him. Then she gestures to a spot on the ground near her and returns her hand to her lap. Takeshi sits, unsettled, He had prepared a speech, an explanation of his predicament, questions he wanted to ask. But her gesture has silenced all that. He sits in the quietness, and at first it is unbearable. His mind, trained to constant activity, rebels against the absence of input, of stimulation, of verbal exchange. It begins to generate thoughts, frantically analyzing the situation, planning what to say next, judging himself for his discomfort, wondering if he has made a mistake in coming here. Minutes pass. The only sounds are the wind moving through the trees, the occasional call of a bird, the rustle of falling leaves. Soshin sits completely still, her breathing so subtle it is almost imperceptible, her presence somehow both extremely vivid and completely transparent, like clear water or clean air, obvious and yet invisible, substantial and yet offering no resistance. The Buddha taught that all conditioned things are impermanent, unsatisfactory, and without independent self. But these are just words, Takeshi thinks, just concepts. He has taught them to students countless times, has written commentaries explaining them in elaborate detail. But sitting here in this silence with this woman who does not speak, he begins to feel the truth of these teachings in a way that has nothing to do with intellectual understanding. His thoughts, which usually feel so solid and important, begin to reveal themselves as ephemeral, arising and passing away like clouds in a vast sky. His sense of himself as a scholar, a teacher, someone important and knowledgeable, begins to feel like a costume he is wearing, a role he is playing, not who he actually is beneath all the learned behaviors and accumulated knowledge. An hour passes, perhaps more. Time becomes strange in the silence, elastic, no longer marked by the usual milestones of conversation and activity. Takeshi's discomfort gradually shifts into something else, not quite comfort, but a kind of settling, an acceptance of what is happening or not happening. His breathing slows. His thoughts, while still arising, no longer hook him so completely. He begins to notice the space between thoughts, the brief gaps of pure awareness that exist before the next thought arises. And in those gaps, something is present, something he has no words for, something his vast learning has never touched, because it exists prior to language, prior to concepts, prior to the whole elaborate structure of knowledge and understanding that he has built his life upon. Soshin turns her head slightly and looks at a maple tree nearby. Takeshi follows her gaze. The tree is magnificent, its leaves a deep crimson, almost glowing in the afternoon light. They watch it together in silence, and slowly Takeshi begins to really see it, not as an object labeled tree, not as a symbol of impermanence or a subject for poetry, but as the actual living presence that it is, this specific tree in this specific moment, exactly as it exists before the mind begins its work of naming and categorizing and explaining. The Buddha taught mindfulness, present moment awareness, but again, these are just words. Takeshi has read sutras on mindfulness, has taught meditation courses on developing mindful awareness, but this direct perception of the tree without the interference of conceptual thought, this is what those teachings were pointing toward, and it is completely different from his understanding of them. A leaf detaches from the tree and falls, spinning slowly in the air, following a complex, unpredictable path downward, landing finally on the ground with a sound so soft it is barely audible. And in that falling, Takeshi sees everything, the whole cycle of birth and death, the continuous transformation of all things, the exquisite beauty and terrible sadness of existence itself, all contained in this one ordinary leaf on this one ordinary autumn afternoon. Tears begin to stream down his face. He is not sure why he is crying. It is not sadness exactly, though there is sadness in it. It is not joy exactly, though there is joy in it. It is simply a response to seeing clearly, to having the veil of concepts and knowledge temporarily lifted so that reality can touch him directly, without the cushioning of intellectual understanding. Soshin glances at him, and the smallest smile appears on her face, not a smile of superiority or amusement, but of recognition, of seeing that something has happened, some small crack has appeared in the armor of his learning, Some small space has opened where direct experience can enter. The afternoon wears on. They sit together as the light changes, as more leaves fall, as the shadows lengthen across the clearing. Soshin does not speak. She does not explain what is happening or tell Takeshi what he should do or understand. She simply sits there, embodying the silence that underlies all sound, the stillness that underlies all movement, the vast awareness that underlies all particular experiences. And gradually, through no effort of his own, Takeshi begins to recognize that the silence is not Soshin's possession or achievement. It is not something she has attained through years of practice. It is what remains when the constant activity of the mind quiets, when the endless talking to ourselves that we call thinking temporarily ceases. The silence is always here, always present, always available. We simply do not notice it because we are so caught up in the noise, in the constant stream of thoughts and words and concepts that fill consciousness like static filling a radio receiver. As evening approaches, Soshin rises smoothly and goes into her small shelter. She returns with 2 bowls of simple food rice and pickled vegetables, and hands one to Takeshi. They eat together in silence, and the food tastes different to him, more vivid somehow, as if his senses have been cleaned or polished, as if he is tasting rice for the first time. After they finish eating, Soshin bows to him, a bow of equals, of mutual recognition. And then she simply returns to her shelter, leaving him alone in the gathering dusk. Takeshi sits for a while longer, not ready to leave, not ready to return to his world of words and teaching and the constant activity of scholarly life. The stars begin to appear overhead, tiny points of light in the darkening sky. An owl calls from somewhere in the forest. The temperature drops, and he feels the cold on his skin, feels his body responding to it. And there is something beautiful even in this simple physical sensation. The Buddha taught the middle way between indulgence and asceticism, between grasping and rejection. But Soshin's silence has shown him another middle way, the way between being caught in concepts and rejecting the intellect entirely, between worshipping knowledge and dismissing it as worthless. His learning is not the problem. The words and ideas he has spent his life accumulating are not obstacles. The problem is mistaking the mat for the territory, the description for the direct experience, the concept for the reality it points toward. Finally, as the stars multiply overhead and the forest settles into its night rhythms, Takeshi rises and bows towards Soshin's shelter, though he cannot see her and does not know if she is aware of his gesture. It does not matter. The bow is for himself as much as for her, an acknowledgement of something received, though nothing was given, something learned though nothing was taught, some transmission that happened in silence and could only have happened in silence. He walks back through the forest, and the path that seemed unclear when he arrived now appears obvious, lit by starlight and some inner clarity that has nothing to do with vision. He knows he will return to his work, to his teaching, to his world of words and concepts. But something has changed. The words will not be dead anymore, hollow shells of meaning. They will be alive because he will know what they point toward, will have tasted directly the reality they attempt to describe. The Buddha taught that his teachings were like a finger pointing at the moon, and that we should not mistake the finger for the moon itself. Takeshi has spent his life studying fingers, comparing different pointing techniques, analyzing the anatomy of pointing, writing treatises on the philosophy of lunar indication. But Soshin's silence has made him look up at the moon itself, the actual luminous presence in the actual sky, and having seen it directly, the fingers pointing toward it take on new meaning and new life. Feel this teaching now as you rest in your own deepening silence. Notice the space between your thoughts, the gap between breaths, the stillness that holds all your experiences, like a vast container holding whatever passes through it. This stillness is not empty in the sense of lacking something. It is full of potential, full of awareness, full of the same presence that Soshin embodied, that Takeshi encountered, that is always here, waiting for us to stop talking and listen. Your mind has been so active today, processing these stories, following these teachings, thinking and analyzing and trying to understand. But now, let it rest. Let the words fall away like autumn leaves falling from their branches. Let the concepts dissolve like morning mist when the sun rises. What remains is not nothing. It is everything before it gets divided into separate things. Consciousness before it gets fragmented into subject and object. The vast silence that speaks more eloquently than any words ever could. And as sleep finally claims you completely as you drift beyond thought into the wordless realm of dreams and deep rest. Know that you are entering Soshin's silence, the same silence that holds the forest and the stars and the falling leaves and the turning earth. It has been here all along, closer than your own breath, more intimate than your own thoughts, waiting patiently for you to stop searching and simply recognize what you already are. The vast awareness in which everything arises and everything returns, the silence that sings the world into being, the stillness that dances. We have come to the final garden now, to the last teaching before sleep takes you completely into its deep embrace. Your body has become weightless, suspended in the space between waking and dreaming, between consciousness and the vast unknown from which consciousness emerges and to which it returns each night. Let us walk together one last time to meet a teacher who embodies the culmination of all the teachings we have encountered, who shows us that the path is not linear but circular, not progressive but recursive, always returning us to the beginning with new eyes, with hearts broken open by understanding. His name was Dogen Zenji, and he lived 8 centuries ago, but his words still echo through time like bells ringing in an empty valley. He was a monk of profound intellectual brilliance who discovered that true understanding has nothing to do with intellect, a seeker of such intensity that he traveled across dangerous seas to study in China, only to realize that what he sought was exactly where he had started, present in every moment. Hidden in plain sight, like the sun hidden by the brightness of its own light. It is winter, deep winter, and we find Dogen at Aheiji, the temple he founded in the mountains, a place so remote that snow falls for months without ceasing, isolating the monks from the rest of the world, creating a silence so complete it seems to have texture and weight. Inside the meditation hall, dozens of monks sit in perfect stillness, their breath visible in the cold air, their bodies arranged in precise rows, each one facing the wall as Dogen has taught them, turning away from the distractions of the visible world to face the emptiness that contains all worlds. But our story does not take place in that formal setting, in that atmosphere of rigorous discipline and prescribed practice. Instead, let us follow Dogen as he walks alone through the temple grounds late at night, unable to sleep, carrying a question that has haunted him for years, a koan of his own making that he cannot solve despite all his wisdom, despite all his realization. The question is this: if all beings already have Buddha nature, if enlightenment is our fundamental condition and not something we must achieve, then why do we practice at all? Why sit in meditation hour after hour, day after day, year after year? Why this endless effort to attain what we supposedly already possess? The Buddha taught that we are already enlightened, that our true nature is pure and luminous and has never been tainted by ignorance or delusion. But if this is true, Dogen wonders, then what is the point of the path? What is the meaning of all the struggle, all the striving, all the hours spent sitting in uncomfortable positions, all the teachings memorized, all the ceremonies performed? He walks through the deep snow, his footsteps leaving a trail that will be covered within the hour by fresh falling flakes. The night is utterly dark, the stars hidden by clouds, the moon absent or obscured. He walks by feel, by memory, by some intuition that guides his feet without the need for vision. And as he walks, something begins to shift in his understanding, some subtle reorientation that is not quite an answer, but more like a change in perspective, a rotation of consciousness that reveals the familiar landscape from an entirely new angle. He thinks of a student who came to him earlier that day, a young monk named Ijo, earnest and dedicated, who had been practicing Zazen sitting meditation for 3 years with fierce determination. Ijo had bowed before Dogen and said, "Master, I practice every day without fail. I sit for hours. I maintain perfect posture. I follow every instruction you have given, but I have not become enlightened. When will my practice bear fruit? When will I finally achieve what I am seeking? Dogen had looked at this young monk for a long time before answering, seeing in him the same mistake he himself had made in his youth, the same fundamental misunderstanding that creates so much unnecessary suffering. You practice Zazen in order to become enlightened? Dogen had asked. Yes, of course, Ejo had replied. Isn't that the purpose of practice? And Dogen had said something that confused the young monk, something that seemed to contradict everything he had been taught. Zazen is not a means to enlightenment. Zazen itself is enlightenment. When you sit, you are not practicing to become a Buddha someday in the future. You are expressing the Buddha nature that is already completely present. Do you understand the difference? Ejo had not understood. Dogen could see it in his face, could see the confusion and frustration. The young monk bowed and left, and Dogen knew that no further explanation would help. That understanding would come not through more words, but through a shift in perception that cannot be forced or manufactured, only allowed to happen when the mind exhausts itself, trying to grasp the ungraspable. Now, walking through the snow in the deep night, Dogen returns to this teaching he had given Ejo, examining it from all angles, feeling his way into its implications. The Buddha taught that practice and enlightenment are not two separate things, not a cause and its effect, not a means and an end. They are one continuous reality, two names for the same undivided activity. When we sit in meditation, we usually imagine that we are doing something now in order to achieve something later. We are practicing now so that we can be enlightened in the future. We are incomplete now, working to become complete. We are deluded now, striving to become awakened. This is the fundamental error. Dogen realizes with sudden clarity that makes him stop walking, that roots him to the spot where he stands, snow falling all around him. This error creates time, creates the split between now and then, between here and there, between who we are and who we think we should become. It creates the path as something we must travel from one point to another, when in truth there is nowhere to go, nothing to achieve, no distance to cross between delusion and awakening. The Buddha taught that form is emptiness and emptiness is form, that these are not two different things but two ways of perceiving the same reality. And practice and enlightenment are like this too, not two different things, but two ways of experiencing the same undivided activity of being fully present, fully alive, fully ourselves, without addition or subtraction. Dogen begins walking again, and now each step feels different. He is not walking toward anything or away from anything. He is not going anywhere at all. He is simply walking, and the walking itself is complete, whole, lacking nothing. Each footfall in the snow is enlightenment expressing itself as a footfall. Each breath of cold air entering his lungs is Buddha nature manifesting as breathing. Each snowflake landing on his robe is the Dharma teaching itself through frozen water crystallizing in infinite unique patterns. He thinks of all the students who come to him seeking something, asking him to give them what they believe they lack. They ask for teachings, for techniques, for methods to achieve enlightenment, and he gives them these things because it is his role as teacher, because people need somewhere to begin, because the forms and practices serve a purpose, even if that purpose is ultimately to exhaust themselves, to reveal their own limitations, to break open and show the emptiness they contain. But what he really wants to tell them, what he has been trying to say in 1,000 different ways, is that they already have what they seek, not in the sense that they possess it, as if enlightenment were an object they own or a state they have achieved, but in the sense that they are it, have always been it, could never not be it, no matter how lost or confused or deluded they feel. The Zazen he teaches, the sitting meditation that is the core of his approach, is not a technique for becoming enlightened. It is the direct expression of enlightenment itself. Enlightenment manifesting as a human being sitting still, breathing, being present to this moment exactly as it is. When his students sit Zazen, they are not practicing to become Buddhas. They are Buddhas practicing Buddha activity. The way a river practices flowing, the way a tree practices growing, the way snow practices falling completely, naturally, without doubt or hesitation, or the divided mind that wonders if it is doing it correctly. The Buddha taught just sitting shikantaza in Japanese, which means sitting without any goal, any purpose, any intention to achieve anything at all. Just sitting for the sake of sitting. Just being for the sake of being. And in this purposeless sitting, this aimless presence, all purposes are fulfilled without being pursued, all goals are achieved without being sought, all seeking comes to rest in the recognition that there is nowhere to go and nothing to attain because everything is already here, already complete, already perfect exactly as it is. Dogen arrives at a small stone bridge that crosses a frozen stream. He stops and leans against the railing, looking down at the ice, at the snow accumulating on its surface. Beneath that frozen surface, water still flows, still moves according to its nature, even though it is temporarily hidden, temporarily contained in a form that seems solid and still. This is like practice and enlightenment, he thinks. Enlightenment is always flowing beneath the surface of our lives, always present, always active. But we do not recognize it because we are looking for something else, something more dramatic or obvious or different from what is actually here. We imagine enlightenment as a peak experience, a transformation, a radical break with our ordinary existence. But what if enlightenment is simply this water flowing beneath ice, Buddha nature expressing itself through every moment of our lives, including the moments of confusion and doubt and suffering? The snow continues to fall, each flake unique and perfect, each one appearing for a moment and then merging with the accumulated mass of all the other flakes, losing its individual form but not its essence, still water, still participating in the endless cycle of evaporation and precipitation and easing and melting that characterizes water's dance through the world. We are like these snowflakes, Dogen thinks. We appear as individuals, as separate selves with our own thoughts and desires and struggles. We maintain this form for a while, this particular pattern of being. And then we die, we melt, we merge back into the great ocean of being from which we arose. But what we fundamentally are consciousness itself, awareness itself, the Buddha nature that animates all things that never comes into existence and therefore can never cease to exist. It is prior to birth and beyond death, the deathless ground that gives rise to all the things that are born and die. The Buddha taught impermanence, that all conditioned things arise and pass away, that nothing lasts, that we cannot hold on to anything. But he also taught the unconditioned, the deathless, the unborn, that is revealed when we see through the illusion of separate selfhood, when we recognize our true nature as this boundless awareness that witnesses all change without being changed, that holds all impermanence without being impermanent. Dogen straightens and continues his walk, circling back now toward the temple, toward the meditation hall where his students sit through the night, toward the warm fire that burns in his quarters, toward sleep and dreams and the next day's teaching. And as he walks, he formulates in his mind the words he will speak to Ijo when he sees him next, words that probably will not help but must be offered anyway, words that point toward what cannot be said. He will tell him, when you practice Zazen, drop off body and mind, forget yourself completely. Do not sit in order to become enlightened. Do not even sit in order to practice correctly. Just sit, completely, wholeheartedly, with your whole being gathered into this moment, into this breath, into this exact experience of being alive. And in that complete presence, that total engagement with what is, you will discover that you are not doing Zazen. Zazen is doing you. You are not practicing enlightenment. Enlightenment is practicing being you. There is no separation between the practice and the goal, between the path and the destination, between this moment and eternity. Feel this teaching now as you hover on the edge of sleep, as consciousness begins to dissolve into the formless realm of deep rest. You have been seeking something through these stories, through these teachings, through this journey into the gardens of Zen wisdom. But what if there is nothing to seek? What if you already are what you are looking for? Your body knows this. It has never doubted its own Buddha nature. It breathes without asking permission, without wondering if it is enlightened enough to breathe. Your heart beats without waiting for certification that it has achieved the proper realization. Your awareness witnesses everything without needing to understand or control or improve what it witnesses. The practice of falling asleep is like zazen. You cannot force it, cannot make it happen through effort or striving. You can only let go, release, allow yourself to fall into the vast darkness that waits beneath consciousness like the ocean waits beneath waves. And in that falling, in that surrender, you discover that the darkness is not empty but full, not the absence of light, but the presence of something deeper than light, the unborn awareness that gives birth to all experience without being separate from any experience. Dogen walks through the snow, and his footprints disappear behind him, covered by fresh flakes, leaving no trace, as if he had never walked there at all. This is the teaching to move through life completely, fully, leaving no trace, not because we are trying to be invisible or selfless, but because we recognize that all traces are temporary. All marks we make are erased. All the monuments we build to ourselves eventually crumble and return to earth. The Buddha taught that in the end, there is nothing to grasp, nothing to hold on to, nothing permanent that can be secured or possessed. But in this recognition of emptiness, of the groundlessness of all existence, there is a strange freedom, a lightness, a joy that has no cause because it is not dependent on circumstances or conditions. It is the joy of being itself, the delight of consciousness, playing the game of existence without attachment to winning or losing, without fear of death or hope for immortality, simply participating fully in this dance that has no beginning and no end. As Dogen reaches the temple and prepares to remove his snow-covered sandals, as he looks back one last time at the white landscape, at the falling snow that continues without pause, without purpose, without doubt, he smiles. The question that sent him walking into the night has not been answered so much as dissolved, revealed as a question that contained a false premise, like asking what color the wind is or how much a shadow weighs. Practice is enlightenment. Enlightenment is practice. They are not two. They have never been two. And you, lying here in the darkness, breathing slowly, sinking into sleep, you are not separate from this teaching. You are the teaching, teaching itself. You are Buddha nature, practicing being exactly who you are. You are enlightenment expressing itself as this particular human life, with all its struggles and joys, all its confusion and clarity, all its beautiful imperfect perfection. Let go now. Fall into sleep the way snow falls from clouds, naturally, effortlessly, without resistance or agenda. Fall into the vast silence where all the teachers we have met are waiting, where Banki and Hakuin and Ikku and Moku and Ryokan and Soshin and Dogen all sit together in a timeless circle, teaching without teaching, present without trying to be present, complete without needing completion. The journey is over, and it has brought you exactly where you started, but you are not the same. You have walked through 10 gardens and returned to your own heart, which was always the only garden, the only temple, the only teacher you needed. Sleep now, Buddha. Sleep now, awakened one. Sleep now, you who have always been what you sought and are only now remembering, only now recognizing, only now allowing yourself to rest in the truth that was never lost and therefore needs no finding. The snow falls. The night deepens, and somewhere in the vast silence, a teacher smiles, knowing that no words were necessary, that the teaching happened between the words, in the space where stories dissolve and only presence remains, infinite and eternal, and exactly here, exactly now, exactly you. The night has become boundless now, infinite, and yet we find ourselves drawn to walk one more time through these gardens of awakening. You are so deep in rest, so far into the twilight between waking and sleeping, that you might wonder if you are dreaming this story or if the story is dreaming you. Let us not worry about such distinctions. Let us simply walk together to meet a teacher whose lesson comes from the most unexpected place, from failure and falling, from the breaking of everything we thought we knew. Her name was Eshun, and she lived during the Edo period, when women who sought the Dharma faced obstacles that men could barely imagine. To become a nun required not just dedication but defiance, not just spiritual yearning but worldly courage, because society had other plans for women, other roles they were expected to fulfill. But Eshun had heard the call to awakening the way some people hear music that others cannot perceive, and once heard, it could not be ignored, could not be silenced by convention, or expectation, or fear. She had been beautiful in her youth, extraordinarily so, and this beauty had been both gift and curse, opening doors and closing them simultaneously. Men pursued her relentlessly, seeing in her face and form only an object for possession, never recognizing the fierce intelligence behind those eyes, the spiritual hunger that burned in her heart like a flame that could not be extinguished. Marriage proposals came from wealthy families, from samurai, from merchants who promised her comfort and status. But Eshun refused them all, driven by a longing she could not name but could not deny. At 23, she managed finally to enter a temple, to take the vows of a nun, to shave her head and don the plain robes that signified her commitment to the path. But even there, in what should have been sanctuary, her beauty haunted her. Male monks would find excuses to visit her convent. Letters arrived, love poems written by men who could not accept her choice. Some praised her spirituality as a kind of exotic adornment, making her refusal of their advances seem like a game, a challenge to be overcome. One monk in particular, a man named Unsho, became obsessed with her. He was learned, accomplished, respected in his lineage, and he convinced himself that his attraction to Eshun was not base desire, but some kind of spiritual connection, a karmic bond that transcended ordinary passion. He wrote to her constantly, visited when he could, spoke to her of how they could practice together, support each other's awakening, as if partnership with him were the natural fulfillment of her spiritual path. Eshun tried to dissuade him gently at first, then firmly, then with increasing desperation as his pursuit intensified. She explained that she had renounced such connections, that her path required solitude and focus, that she was not interested in any form of romantic or spiritual partnership with him. But Unsho would not hear it. He interpreted her refusals as tests, as obstacles to overcome, as part of some elaborate dance between them. The other nuns whispered. Some believed Eshun must be encouraging him somehow, must be giving him hope through subtle signals they could not detect. After all, they reasoned, why else would such a respected monk behave this way? The abbess called Eshun to her chambers and suggested, with careful words and downcast eyes, that perhaps Eshun should consider leaving the convent, moving to another temple far away, somewhere her beauty would not cause such disruption. It is night, deep night, and we find Eshun alone in her small room, sitting before a charcoal brazier, its coals glowing red in the darkness. She has been sitting there for hours, not in meditation exactly, but in a state of profound crisis, feeling the weight of impossible choices pressing down on her like stones on her chest. The Buddha taught that attachment causes suffering, and Eshun understands this teaching intellectually. She is not attached to beauty. She did not cultivate it, did not ask for it, does not identify with it. She has shaved her head, worn plain robes, done everything she can to eliminate the external markers of attractiveness. But still it follows her, still it shapes how others see her, still it creates obstacles on the path she has chosen. She thinks of leaving, of going to another temple, as the abbess suggested. But she knows it will be the same there. Wherever she goes, this face goes with her, this body that others see as an object of desire rather than a vessel for awakening. She could hide herself away completely, become a hermit, live alone in the mountains where no one would see her. But this feels like defeat, like allowing society's sickness to dictate the terms of her practice. Then another thought comes, terrible and clarifying. If her beauty is the obstacle, if this form is what prevents others from seeing past the surface to the fierce determination beneath, then perhaps the form itself must be changed, must be altered so radically that no one could mistake her for an object of desire ever again. The coals in the brazier glow steadily, hypnotically. Ishan reaches toward them, feeling the heat on her extended hand. She thinks of the Buddha, who in a previous life gave his body to feed a hungry tigress, and her cubs who taught through example that the body is temporary, is not who we truly are, is something that can be sacrificed when necessary for a greater purpose. The Buddha taught non-harming, taught loving kindness toward all beings, including ourselves. But he also taught renunciation, taught that we must be willing to give up everything that stands between us and awakening, taught that half measures accomplish nothing, that true commitment requires complete sincerity even when the cost is terrible. Eshun picks up a metal poker and places its tip in the coals, watching as it heats, as it begins to glow the same red as the charcoal. Her hand is steady, her mind is clear. She is not acting from anger or despair or self-hatred. She is acting from a clarity that has come after hours of sitting with an impossible situation, after exhausting every other option, after seeing with absolute certainty that this is what must be done. When the poker is hot enough, she lifts it from the coals and, without hesitation, without allowing herself time to reconsider, she presses it against her face. The pain is immediate, overwhelming, a white-hot scream that floods her nervous system and threatens to obliterate consciousness itself. The smell of burning flesh fills the small room, acrid and terrible. She holds the poker there for several seconds, then moves it to another part of her face, then another, systematically destroying the beauty that has been her prison. She does not cry out. She will not give pain that satisfaction, will not wake the other nuns and create a scene that would require explanations and interventions. She simply endures, watching her mind's reaction to the agony with the same attention she brings to her meditation practice, seeing how consciousness fragments under extreme sensation, how it tries to escape, how it protests and pleads and bargains with reality. When she is finished, when her face is marked with burns that will scar permanently, that will transform her from beautiful to disfigured, she sets down the poker and sits perfectly still, breathing through the waves of pain that continue to crash through her body. Tears stream down her ruined cheeks, not from emotion but from the body's automatic response to trauma. She does not wipe them away. She simply sits, observing, witnessing, present to this moment of absolute transformation. In the morning, when the other nuns see what she has done, there is horror, confusion, questions she does not answer. The abbess sends for a doctor, but Eshun refuses treatment beyond the most basic care. Let the wounds heal as they will. Let the scars form naturally. Testimony to this night, to this choice, to this radical act of self-determination. Word spreads quickly through the Buddhist community. Some call her mad, disturbed, someone who clearly needs help rather than admiration. Others are horrified at what they see as self-mutilation, a violation of the precept against harming living beings. But a very few understand what she has done, recognize in her action the same fierce determination that drove the Buddha to sit beneath the Bodhi tree vowing not to rise until he achieved awakening, that drove Bodhidharma to sit facing a wall for 9 years, that drove countless practitioners throughout history to take extreme measures when ordinary methods proved insufficient. Unsure, when he hears what happened, is devastated. He comes to the convent weeping, begging to see her, full of remorse and guilt. But Eshun refuses to see him. His guilt is his problem, not hers. She did not do this to punish him or teach him a lesson. She did it to free herself, to claim ownership of her own path, to remove the obstacle that others had made of her appearance. The burns heal slowly, leaving her face scarred and twisted, no longer beautiful by any conventional measure. And something unexpected happens. People begin to see her differently. Without the distraction of beauty, they notice other things: the intensity of her gaze, the clarity of her teaching when she speaks, the absolute sincerity of her practice. Students begin to seek her out, drawn not by her appearance, but by something they sense in her presence, some quality of uncompromising authenticity that commands respect. Years pass. Eshun becomes known as a teacher of unusual power and directness, someone who does not accommodate weakness or excuse half-hearted effort, but who also understands suffering in a way that comes only from having suffered profoundly oneself. She never speaks of that night, of what drove her to such an extreme act. When students ask about her scars, she says simply, "These are reminders that awakening requires everything, that there is no path for those who want to keep one foot in comfort and safety." The Buddha taught the middle way, the path between extremes. But Eshun understood that finding the middle requires first knowing the extremes, requires being willing to go to the edge and look over, requires a kind of courage that most people never develop because they are never pressed hard enough, never face obstacles that demand such radical solutions. Now, decades after that night, we find Eshun old, her scarred face weathered further by time and the elements. She sits in a simple temple she established herself, a place where women who have nowhere else to go can practice without fear, without harassment, without being told they are not suited for the path because of their gender or appearance or the accidents of their birth. A young woman sits before her, someone who has recently arrived at the temple, fleeing an arranged marriage, desperate to practice but uncertain if she has the strength, the dedication, the capacity for the kind of commitment that true practice requires. "Teacher," the young woman asks, "how do you know if you are ready for this path? How do you know if you have what it takes?" Eshun looks at her with those fierce eyes set in that ruined face, and she is quiet for a long moment before answering. "You are asking the wrong question," she says finally. "You will never be ready. You will never have what it takes." Readiness is something we imagine from the outside, looking at the path and wondering if we are capable of walking it. But the path is not something you walk. It is something that walks you, that carries you forward, that reveals capacities you did not know you had because you had never needed them before. She pauses, then continues. "I did not know I could do what I did to my face until I had already done it. I did not decide I was brave enough or committed enough. I simply saw what needed to be done and did it, and only afterward did I discover that I had been capable of it all along." The young woman looks uncertain, perhaps frightened by this response. "But teacher, surely you do not recommend that everyone should—" "No," Eshun interrupts. "I recommend nothing. Each person's obstacles are their own. Each person's path is unique. What I did was necessary for me, given my situation, given who I was and what stood in my way. Your obstacles will be different. The sacrifices required of you will be different. But the principle is the same when you encounter something that truly blocks your path, something that cannot be gone around or negotiated with or gradually overcome. You must be willing to do whatever is necessary to remove it, regardless of the cost. Feel this teaching now, as you rest in the deep darkness. What are you holding on to that blocks your path? What comfort, what identity, what cherished self-image stands between you and complete freedom? Eshun's story is not asking you to harm yourself, to punish your body, to seek out suffering. It is asking something more subtle and perhaps more difficult. It is asking you to be honest about what you are not willing to give up, what you are protecting, what you are keeping safe from the transformative fire of genuine practice. The Buddha taught that we must give up everything to gain everything, that we must die to be reborn, that the seed must break open in the dark earth before it can grow toward the light. This is not metaphor. This is the actual process of transformation, which is always violent in some sense, always involves the destruction of what was to make space for what will be. Your body, sinking deeper into sleep, knows this process intimately. Every night you die a small death, surrendering consciousness, releasing control, allowing yourself to be unmade and remade in dreams and deep rest. You do not resist this nightly dissolution because you trust that you will return, will wake again, will reconstitute yourself in the morning. But what if you applied the same trust to your waking life? What if you were willing to let yourself be unmade, to let the false identities and protective barriers burn away, to emerge scarred perhaps but free, disfigured by conventional standards but beautiful, with the terrible beauty of absolute authenticity? Eshun sits in her temple as night falls, as students settle into their evening meditation, as the mountain outside grows quiet and still. Her face, which once caused such disruption, such unwanted attention, such obstacle to practice, is now simply her face, neither beautiful nor ugly, neither a gift nor a curse, just the face she has, marked by her choices, testimony to her commitment, proof that she values awakening more than appearance, truth more than comfort, freedom more than safety. The young woman who asked her question earlier sits in meditation now, wrestling with her own doubts and fears, her own questions about whether she can do this, whether she should even try. And Eshun, watching her with those fierce, scarred features, sees herself decades ago, sees the same uncertainty, the same fear disguised as reasonable caution. She knows that words will not help this student, that teaching can only point, that each person must walk into the fire themselves, must discover for themselves what they are made of, what they can endure, what they are willing to sacrifice. The Buddha taught that no one can walk the path for you, that teachers can only point the way, that awakening is something each person must achieve alone, through their own effort, through their own willingness to face what must be faced and do what must be done. Let yourself rest now in the darkness, in the unknowing, in the space where transformation happens beyond your control or understanding. You have walked through 11 gardens, met 11 teachers, heard 11 teachings that all say the same thing in different languages. Let go, be present, see through the illusion of separation, recognize what you already are beneath all the layers of conditioning and identity and protective armor. Eshun's scarred face dissolves into darkness as sleep finally claims you completely. But something of her fierce determination remains, planted like a seed in soil you did not know was fertile, waiting for the right conditions to sprout, to grow, to bloom into whatever form your own awakening will take. The path is not gentle, transformation is not comfortable, but it is real, it is possible, and somewhere in the deep night of your own unknowing, it is already happening, already unfolding, already carrying you home. The night has become timeless now, eternal, and yet here we are again, drawn once more into the garden, pulled by a thread we cannot see toward a teaching we did not know we needed. You are floating in that deep ocean of near sleep, where the boundaries between stories dissolve, where all the teachers we have met begin to merge into one voice, one presence, one vast silence that speaks through many mouths. Let us walk together one final time to meet a teacher who will show us that the end of the path is also its beginning, that arrival and departure are the same gesture, that coming home means recognizing we never left. His name was Sengai, and he lived in a time when Zen had become respectable, when temples were wealthy and monks were comfortable, when the fierce fire of the early masters had cooled into warm embers of institutional religion. Sengai was the abbot of a major temple, a position of honor and responsibility, but he wore his authority lightly, playfully, refusing to take seriously the things that serious people insisted were important. He was an artist, a calligrapher whose brushwork was sought after by collectors and connoisseurs, but he gave most of his work away, scrawling poems and images on scraps of paper for anyone who asked, treating the sacred and the mundane with the same irreverent affection. It is very late at night or very early in the morning, that ambiguous hour when night has exhausted itself, but dawn has not yet gathered strength to appear. Sengai sits alone in his studio, a small room cluttered with brushes and inkstones, papers scattered like autumn leaves across every surface. He is old now, in his 80s, his hands spotted with age, his back curved from decades of bending over his work, but his eyes are bright, alive with a mischief that age has not dimmed, that perhaps has even intensified, as the years have taught him not to take anything too seriously, including and especially himself. Before him lies a fresh sheet of paper, expensive handmade washi, that a wealthy patron sent with a request for a piece of calligraphy to hang in his home, something profound and beautiful that would demonstrate the patron's refined taste and spiritual cultivation. Sengai has been staring at this blank paper for an hour, his brush loaded with ink, ready to make the first stroke, but something holds him back. He thinks about all the calligraphy he has created over the years, all the characters he has written, words like emptiness and Buddha and awakening, phrases from the sutras, poems by the ancient masters. He has written these things beautifully, with perfect technique and genuine feeling. People have treasured them, framed them, displayed them in places of honor. But has any of it really conveyed the teaching? Has any brushstroke ever captured the living truth that moves beneath and within and beyond all words and images? The Buddha taught that the Dharma is like a finger pointing at the moon, and we must not mistake the finger for the moon itself. But what about calligraphy of the Dharma? Is it a finger pointing at the moon? How many layers of representation can we pile up before we lose sight of what we are pointing toward? Sengai dips his brush in the ink again, brings it to the paper, and then sets it down without making a mark. He laughs quietly to himself, a sound like dry leaves rustling, like an old man's amusement at his own predicament. Here he is, a Zen master, unable to write a simple piece of calligraphy because he is thinking too much, because he has forgotten the most basic teaching. Just do it, completely, without second-guessing or self-consciousness, the way a bird flies or a river flows. Then an image comes to him, something he saw earlier that day while walking in the temple garden. A child, one of the young monk's nephews, visiting for the day, had been playing with a ball, throwing it against a wall and catching it over and over, completely absorbed in the simple repetitive activity. The child was not thinking about technique or purpose or achievement. He was not trying to improve his throwing or perfect his catching. He was simply playing, and in that play there was a completeness, a wholeness that all Sengai's years of practice and study and teaching somehow pointed toward, but could never quite capture. Sengai picks up his brush again, and this time he does not hesitate. In quick, fluid strokes he draws a circle, not a perfect circle, not geometrically precise, but a living circle that completes itself and returns to its beginning in one continuous gesture. And inside the circle he writes a single word, asobi, play. Then he sets down his brush and looks at what he has created. The wealthy patron will probably be disappointed. He wanted something profound, something that would impress his guests, something dense with meaning and spiritual gravitas. Instead, he is getting a wobbly circle and a word that suggests frivolity, that seems to diminish the seriousness of Buddhist practice. But Sengai knows that this is the teaching the patron needs, even if it is not the teaching he wants. All of Buddhism, all of Zen, all the years of sitting and studying and striving, ultimately point toward this, the recognition that life is play, that existence is not a problem to be solved, but a game to be played, that the universe is not grinding us down towards some predetermined conclusion, but sing us into being moment by moment, inviting us to participate fully without holding back, without protecting ourselves, without the fear that we might be doing it wrong. The Buddha taught that suffering arises from taking things too seriously, from clinging to the idea that this matters in some ultimate sense, that we must get it right, that our performance is being judged and our worth is being measured. But what if none of that is true? What if the whole thing is play, serious play perhaps? Play with real consequences and genuine stakes, but play nonetheless, activity undertaken for its own sake rather than for some external reward or purpose. Sengai thinks of all the students who have come to him over the years with their earnest questions and desperate seeking, their faces tight with spiritual ambition, their bodies rigid with the effort of trying to become enlightened. He has tried to help them, has given them koans and meditation instructions, and pointed them toward the truth in 1,000 different ways. But often what they really needed was simply to relax, to stop trying so hard, to recognize that they were already what they sought, that the Buddha nature they were trying to achieve was the very consciousness that was doing the seeking. He remembers a student from years ago, a young man named Keiko, who had practiced with fierce intensity for a decade, sitting until his legs went numb, maintaining perfect posture, no matter how much pain he felt, following every rule and precept with scrupulous exactitude. Keiko had come to Sengai one day, his face haggard, his eyes red from lack of sleep, and said, "Master, I have practiced for 10 years without a break. I have never missed a meditation session. I have maintained perfect discipline. But I have not achieved enlightenment. What am I doing wrong? Sengai had looked at this exhausted, depleted young man, and something in him felt profound sadness mixed with affection. Tell me, he had said, do you remember playing as a child? Keiko had blinked, confused by the question. Yes, of course, but what does that? Did you play in order to become enlightened? Sengai interrupted. Did you laugh and run and make up games with your friends because you thought it would lead to awakening? No, of course not. I played because it was fun, because I enjoyed it. And yet, Sengai said gently, in that play, in that unself-conscious enjoyment, you were more enlightened than you are now with all your fierce practice and desperate striving. You were completely present, completely engaged, not thinking about whether you were doing it right or what you would gain from it. You were just playing. Keiko had stared at him, and Sengai could see the resistance in his face, the part of him that wanted to reject this teaching as too simple, too trivial, not serious enough for the great matter of life and death. But there was also something else in his expression, a flicker of recognition, a memory of what it felt like to be unself-consciously alive, fully engaged with the moment without the overlay of judgment and evaluation. Go, Sengai had told him. Take a week off from practice. Go into town. Eat good food. Talk to people. Watch children playing in the street. Fly a kite if you want. Just be a human being for a while instead of a spiritual athlete trying to achieve some imaginary goal. Keiko had left looking uncertain, almost frightened, as if Sengai had suggested he do something dangerous or forbidden. But he had followed the instruction, and when he returned a week later, something had shifted in him. His face was softer, his body less rigid, his eyes clearer. He had not become enlightened in any dramatic sense, but he had remembered something essential, had reconnected with a part of himself that all his serious practice had actually buried deeper rather than revealing. Now, sitting in his studio looking at the calligraphy, he has just created a circle and a word, play. Sengai feels satisfied in a way that none of his more elaborate works have ever made him feel. This is true teaching, he thinks, not because it is profound or clever or beautiful, but because it is honest, because it comes from his own direct experience rather than from some idea about what teaching should look like. The Buddha taught that we should be like children to enter the kingdom of heaven, though he used different words, different metaphors drawn from his own cultural context. But the meaning is the same. We must recover the unself-consciousness of childhood, the capacity to be completely absorbed in what we are doing without the divided mind that watches and judges and compares, without the anxiety about whether we are doing it right or getting closer to our goal. Sengai stands, his old knees protesting, and walks to the window of his studio. Outside, the darkness is beginning to thin, the first hint of dawn touching the eastern sky with pale color. He watches as night transforms into day, as the eternal cycle continues its turning, as the world renews itself once again for no reason except that this is what it does, this is the play it plays, the game it cannot help playing, because playing is its nature. And he thinks, this is what I have been trying to teach all these years. Not some special knowledge or technique or state of consciousness, but simply this, the recognition that existence is not a burden to be endured, or a problem to be solved, but a play to be enjoyed, a dance to be danced, a game to be played with complete sincerity and absolute non-seriousness simultaneously. The wealthy patron who requested the calligraphy will receive it and probably be disappointed, probably be confused, probably wonder if the old master is becoming senile, giving him childish drawings instead of the profound wisdom he expected. But maybe, just maybe, if he sits with it long enough, if he lets it work on him the way koans work on students, he will see past the surface to what it points toward, the invitation to stop taking himself so seriously, to stop using spiritual practice as another way to achieve status or prove his woe, to simply play the game of being alive with the same wholehearted engagement that children bring to their games. Feel this teaching now as you float in that ocean between waking and sleeping. all the effort you have made, all the striving and seeking and trying to improve yourself. What if you could let that go? What if you could approach your life the way a child approaches play, completely engaged but not attached to outcomes, fully committed but not identifying with success or failure, present to each moment for its own sake rather than as a means to some future end? Your breath moves in and out, and it is not working toward anything. It is not trying to become more enlightened with each inhalation. It is simply breathing, playing the breathing game, the endless rhythm that sustains life without asking why or what for. Your heart beats its steady rhythm, not pursuing enlightenment, not trying to prove itself worthy, just beating because beating is what hearts do, because this is the play it plays. Sengai returns to his desk and looks one more time at the calligraphy, the imperfect circle, the single word. He thinks of all the teachers we have met in these stories, all the different approaches and methods and styles. Bankai with his unborn mind, Hakuin with his fierce koans, Ikkyu with his wild unconventionality, Moku with her compassion for grief, Ryokan with his simplicity, Soshin with her silence, Dogen with his practice enlightenment, Ishun with her radical commitment. All of them were playing the same game, expressing the same truth in different forms, pointing toward the same moon with different fingers. And now Sengai, in his old age, has added his own finger to the collection, a wobbly circle and a word inviting us to stop seeking and start playing, to stop trying to become something and start being what we already are, to recognize that the whole magnificent mess of existence is not a test we might fail, but a game we cannot lose because we are not separate from it. We are not playing against it. We are the play itself playing. The Buddha taught that his teaching was like a raft to cross a river, useful for the crossing, but to be abandoned once you reach the other shore, not carried on your back as if it were the goal rather than the means. But Sengai's teaching goes one step further. What if there is no other shore? What if this shore is the other shore, and the crossing is not a journey from delusion to enlightenment, but the recognition that delusion and enlightenment are both part of the play, both necessary, both perfect exactly as they are. Sleep is taking you now, pulling you down into its depths, into the darkness where dreams arise and dissolve like bubbles in water. Let yourself go. Let yourself play the sleeping game, the dreaming game, the game of consciousness exploring its own infinite potential through the particular form that is you. You are not doing this wrong. You cannot do this wrong. You are playing perfectly because perfect play means complete engagement, without holding back, without protecting yourself, without the fear that you might lose, because there is nothing to lose and no one to lose it. Sengai rolls up the calligraphy carefully, ties it with a simple cord, and sets it aside for the patron who will collect it tomorrow. He blows out the lamp in his studio and the room returns to darkness. But the circle remains, invisible now but no less present, continuing to complete itself endlessly, returning always to its beginning, playing the game of being a circle drawn by an old man's hand in the middle of the night while the world sleeps and dreams and slowly spins toward another dawn. And you, floating in your own darkness, your own return to the source, you are also a circle completing itself, ending where you began, arriving at the place you never left, playing the game that has no winner or loser, because everyone who plays has already won simply by playing, simply by being her. Simply by being the universe's way of experiencing itself through these particular eyes, this particular breath, this particular moment of consciousness, arising and dissolving in the vast ocean of awareness that has no shore.